Darkness was never silent. It breathed, it dripped, it whispered. Jamie learned that on day one beneath the barn, counting splinters in moon-thin light between floorboards, while his stomach begged for noise just to know time was still moving. When hope finally frayed, he pressed a trembling hand to the dirt roof of his prison and did the only thing left. He prayed not loud, just a thought flung upward that someone, somewhere, could hear without ears. Far above, a German shepherd named Shadow jerked to a halt outside the sagging barn. No scent, no footprint, yet something vibrated in his chest. A pulse of terror he recognized like thunder before rain. His handler, Officer Aaron Blake, sighed at the sight. Another false alarm, surely. But Shadow's bark rolled across the pasture like cannon fire, shaking dust from rafters and certainty from Aaron's bones. One bark, then another, until a tired cop knelt beside a determined dog and clawed at soil that felt suddenly hollow. Jamie's world shifted as daylight stabbed through a lifted board and a voice shouted, "We've got life down here!" This is the story of how a boy's whispered prayer became a bark loud enough to save 4 souls and a town that nearly stayed deaf forever. The sun had just begun to stretch its golden fingers across the sleepy fields of Willow Creek, dappling the frostbitten grass with a warm hue that belonged to no particular season, just a soft, timeless stillness. It was the kind of morning that felt borrowed from an old photograph. Birds silent, wind barely stirring, and the distant silhouette of the Ozark Hills hazy with dew. Lieutenant Aaron Blake stood at the edge of a dirt track just outside town, his breath visible in the cold air, hands tucked into his jacket. A few yards ahead, Shadow, his German Shepherd canine partner, zigzagged across the dry grass with practiced precision, ears erect, posture alert, waiting for the next hand signal. They were running drills, like they always did on Aaron's days off. To most, it would seem like work, but to Aaron, this was as close to peace as he ever got anymore. He raised his left hand. Shadow froze, mid-step, body low, eyes locked onto Aaron's. The bond between them was unspoken, forged through 4 years of arrests, raids, and rescue calls. A wordless dance of instincts sharpened by repetition, and trust born of survival. Aaron gave a sharp 2-finger signal. Shadow darted forward, circled wide, then lay flat beside a stump as if hiding in ambush. A small grin tugged at the corner of Aaron's mouth. "Show off," he muttered, reaching for the ball in his jacket pocket. But before he could toss it, his radio crackled. "Unit 2, Bravo, come in." Aaron pressed his shoulder mic. "2, Bravo here, go ahead." "We got a call from a hiker near Route 19. Said they heard weird noises coming from the old Carlisle property horse ranch west of the ridge. Might just be a squatter, but dispatch wants a visual check." Aaron's brow furrowed. The Carlisle ranch had been abandoned for over a decade. Most of the buildings had caved in from rot or wind damage. He'd driven past it dozens of times, and it never seemed like more than a ghost skeleton baking in the sun. "Anyone else responding?" he asked. "Negative. Nearest unit's 15 minutes out. Your closest." He sighed, casting a glance at Shadow, who had returned and was now sitting obediently at his feet, tail gently thumping. "Copy that," Aaron replied. "We'll swing by for a look. Ems." As he clicked the radio back onto his belt, he gave the dog a sideways glance. "You ready to go inspect a haunted barn?" Shadow barked once, not loud, just firm. Aaron smiled, despite the unease curling in his gut. They loaded into the cruiser. Aaron adjusted the rearview mirror, watching Shadow settle into the back seat with the calm of a soldier about to clock into duty. The dog's eyes didn't blink much. He stared out the window like he was reading something the rest of the world couldn't see. The drive was short, a narrow gravel road snaked between dried cornfields and brittle wire fences, ending in front of the Carlisle property. The main house slouched to one side like an old man with a broken spine. Weeds choked the garden beds. Rusted wind chimes clinked gently under the porch eaves. And to the far right stood the barn, its red paint peeled to gray. The roof partially collapsed, door hanging by one hinge. Aaron parked on the roadside. For a few seconds, he just sat behind the wheel, staring at the place with the stillness of someone trying to listen for something that hadn't made a sound yet. Shadow stirred in the back. Aaron turned. "You feel something?" The dog's ears twitched forward. Aaron opened the door. The air smelled of old wood, cold dirt, and something faintly metallic like rust or maybe time itself. They stepped through the broken gate. A raccoon darted from under the porch. A bird burst from the barn rafters and startled them both. Aaron's hand instinctively brushed the grip of his sidearm, but he didn't draw it, just to check in, he reminded himself aloud. But Shadow didn't relax. His stance had changed. He wasn't walking beside Aaron now. He was ahead, tail rigid, head lowered, nose to the ground. His pace slowed as they approached the barn, and then abruptly he stopped and barked. Once. Loud. Deep. It wasn't a bark for attention. It was a warning, a sound that ricocheted across the field like the crack of a gun. Aaron's pulse jumped. "Easy," he said, kneeling beside him. But Shadow didn't ease. His muscles were coiled. He barked again, louder this time, insistent, then a third, echoing off the tin roof and into Aaron's bones. The barn didn't move. Nothing stirred inside, but something had shifted in the air, a pressure, a weight, as if the ground itself was holding its breath. Aaron reached for his radio again. "Dispatch, this is 2. Bravo. I'm gonna need a secondary unit out here. Something's got my K9's attention, and it's not a fox or a broken floorboard. Copie de Bravo. Unis en route." Shadow began circling the barn's left side, growling low, every hair on his back raised like static. He stopped near the rotted siding and started to paw at the ground, then scratch at a plank of the exterior wall. Aaron followed. "What is it, buddy?" he asked, kneeling. He examined the wall. Looked like it had been patched hastily. Uneven dirt pressed into the corners. One of the boards didn't match the rest. Lighter, newer, and oddly sunken. Shadow let out a whimper. Not out of fear. It was something else. Urgency. A need to be understood. Aaron's stomach tightened. He reached out and pressed a hand to the board. It moved, and beneath it, the ground didn't sound like ground. It sounded hollow. The Carlisle Ranch looked like every forgotten place in rural Arkansas, weather-worn and brittle, as if time had gnawed at its edges until even the shadows had given up. The barn stood crooked at the far end of the field, its red paint now a tired gray, the door sagging like a mouth about to whisper something no one wanted to hear. Aaron Blake stepped out of the cruiser, boots crunching against gravel and brittle weeds. The wind stirred just enough to rattle a loose sheet of tin on the roof. It sounded like bones. Shadow hopped out behind him, landing with a muted thump. His ears flicked forward, nose lifted, body still. Aaron glanced over. "It's just a check-in," he muttered again, more to himself than to the dog. But Shadow didn't look back. They walked through the broken fence line. Aaron scanned the grounds. The paddocks were overgrown, fences leaning, gate chains rusted and broken. The front porch of the main house had collapsed inward, and vines curled up the chimney like green veins wrapping around a dying heart. He took a few slow steps toward the barn, and that's when Shadow stopped. Dead stop. Aaron turned. The German shepherd's body had gone rigid, tail stiff as a rod, eyes locked on the barn's left side, not the door, not the open entryway, but something just past it. His ears twitched once, then twice, and then he barked. A single bark, but it was loud, sharp, guttural. The kind of bark that didn't ask a question. It demanded an answer. It echoed across the property like a war drum, bouncing off the hills and slamming into the silence. Aaron flinched, despite himself. "Shadow," he said quietly. "What is it?" The dog took a step forward, then another. Then he barked again, louder, longer. A bellow from his chest that didn't stop even when Aaron hissed for him to hush. Shadow was in a different state now. Not agitated, not excited, driven. His paws dug into the earth as he surged forward toward the barn's side wall, nails scrabbling against cracked boards and dirt, barking in rhythmic bursts. His tail didn't wag. His stance was low, defensive. A soldier at the gate. Aaron moved quickly. Hey! What's gotten into you?" He grabbed Shadow's harness, trying to pull him back. But the dog growled, not at Aaron, but at whatever was behind that wall. It was a low, vibrating snarl, like something was boiling in his chest and had nowhere else to go. Aaron paused, breath caught halfway. This wasn't play. This wasn't a squirrel or a trapped possum. He'd worked with Shadow long enough to know the difference between a detection alert and whatever this was. This was a warning. He pulled out his flashlight and swept the beam across the barn wall. Nothing moved. The siding looked like the rest rot, weather damage, a few planks that didn't quite line up. But to Shadow, something was wrong. He kept pressing his snout to one particular section, then backing up and barking again, loud enough that Aaron felt it in his ribs. All right. I hear you," Aaron muttered, tapping his radio. "Dispatch, this is 2. Bravo. Be advised, I've got a strong canine reaction near the southeast wall of the barn. I'm requesting secondary backup before proceeding. Might be nothing, but the dog's not letting it go." "Copy that, 2. Bravo. Units en route. E to 12 minutes. Aaron took a slow breath, eyes on the barn. 12 minutes felt like a long time, with a dog barking like the apocalypse was behind the wall. He looked at Shadow. "You sure about this, buddy?" Shadow responded by letting out another bark, one so deep it sounded like thunder compressed into a single breath. His nails clawed at the boards now. Not just alerting, digging. Aaron's heart began to pound, not from fear, not yet, but from a tightening sensation in his chest. An itch at the back of his mind. A memory from 2 years ago when Shadow had barked like this in a swamp in Benton County and they'd found a body beneath the surface. Not even the cadaver dogs had caught the scent. Only Shadow. Bark. Dig. Wait. Bark again. He turned back to the wall. And that's when he noticed it. One of the boards just to the left of where Shadow had fixated didn't match. The grain was too new, too clean, as if it had been replaced. Poorly. Aaron knelt, running gloved fingers along the edge. The board gave slightly under pressure. He pushed harder, it shifted. Not broken. Loosened. Just enough to open. Something. He stood slowly. "Shadow," he said, his voice quieter now. "What the hell are you trying to tell me?" The dog didn't answer, not with words. But his bark was changing, turning from alarm to insistence, urgency, as if the clock were ticking and Aaron was already too late. And in that moment, standing in the windless quiet of a forgotten ranch with a dog barking against a wall that wasn't supposed to be hollow, Aaron Blake felt it in his bones. Something was down there. Something waiting. Something buried. And someone somewhere had counted on no one listening. But they hadn't counted on Shadow. The wind had gone still. It was the kind of quiet that made your ears strain for something any just to fill the void. Aaron's breath came slow, controlled, but underneath it all, something coiled in his chest. Shadow stood at the barn's base like a statue carved from tension, eyes wide, nose pressed to the warped planks. Aaron kept the radio pressed to his shoulder. 2. Bravo to Central Secondary Unit still en route. Affirmative 2. Bravo. Unit 4 en route, 6 minutes out. Do you require immediate assistance? Aaron hesitated. He looked at Shadow, still locked onto the same warped section of barn wall. The dog had started scratching, now methodical, digging claws into loose soil and splinters. He wasn't acting out of stress. This wasn't panic. This was certainty. "I'm initiating preliminary check," Aaron said finally. "K9 alert is strong. I've got visual anomalies on the wall. Will advise." He clipped the radio back to his belt, exhaled slowly, and moved toward the wall. Shadow let out a short, sharp bark, then backed up 2 paces to give Aaron room, tail rigid, legs braced, breathing shallow. The boards were mismatched, like puzzle pieces from different sets forced into place. One was gray and warped from age. Another, just inches beside it, still held faint signs of newer stain. Beneath the lowest board, the dirt was darker, disturbed recently, maybe weeks ago. Aaron dropped to one knee and slid his gloved fingers into the seam. It gave. Not much, but just enough. He rocked it carefully, inch by inch, until the board popped loose with a dry groan of protest. Shadow didn't bark this time. He simply inched forward, nose twitching, ears pinned back. Aaron leaned in. Behind the plank was no stud, no support, beam just, more earth, the kind that had been tampered with. He swept his light across the interior side and spotted something odd. The packed dirt below was uneven, mounded in places, too smooth in others, like something had been dug up and then buried again. He stepped back and reached into the cruiser for the emergency kit. Shovel, pry bar, flashlight. Shadow paced behind him, circling the spot like a storm building pressure. Aaron's gut twisted. He wasn't just seeing clues now. He was feeling them something wrong, humming beneath the surface, like tension strung tight on a wire. He started digging. Each stroke of the shovel cut through the earth with a sound that felt too loud. Dust rose around him, clinging to his sleeves, choking the sunlight in the doorway. After a few layers, the dirt grew dense and compact. Beneath it, buried boards ran horizontally, planks laid hastily, the ends uneven and warped from moisture. Shadow whined behind him, low and insistent. Aaron grabbed the pry bar and wedged it between the boards. The wood groaned, nails snapping loose one by one until a hollow thud echoed back up from the void beneath. He froze. That sound wasn't dirt. It was space. Air where there shouldn't be air. He pushed harder. Another plank came free. Then another, revealing a crude wooden panel, roughly cut and nailed shut. Aaron reached down, pressed a hand to it. It moved slightly. His mouth went dry. He turned to Shadow. The dog stood completely still now, his entire body tense, pupils wide. Aaron had seen Shadow search buildings before, alert to fentanyl in glove compartments, track suspects through 3 city blocks in the rain, even find the body of a drowned girl when every other unit had given up. But he had never seen Shadow like this. He was listening, not to Aaron, not even to the world, but to something beneath them. Aaron crouched lower and gripped the edge of the panel. "Here we go," he whispered. With a sharp pull, he lifted eye dust, and stale air rushed up like a breath being released after too long in silence. And in that moment, something changed. Shadow whimpered, a soft, broken sound. Aaron didn't move. A sudden, earthy cold hit him from below. His flashlight flickered, casting light into the narrow space. It wasn't just a hole, it was a passage. A man-made crawl space, roughly 4 feet deep, boxed in with plywood and covered from above with patchwork dirt and floorboards. And somewhere beneath it, movement. Barely. Faint. Aaron leaned closer, heart slamming in his ears. And then he saw it. A flash of skin. Small fingers. Thin. Barely twitching. He dropped the flashlight. "Shadow?" he breathed. The dog barked again once. Loud. A sound that ricocheted through Aaron's spine and into the memory of every instinct that had ever saved his life. He scrambled back for the radio. "Dispatch, this is 2. Bravo. I need medics. I need units. I need child protective. Now." His voice cracked at the end of the sentence. He didn't care. Shadow sat beside the hole now, perfectly still, as if guarding something sacred. His head turned slightly, ears tilting to listen, but he didn't move. He just waited. Aaron turned back to the space below and shined the light again. This time, he saw them clearly. 4 pairs of eyes. Sunken, terrified, silent. One of them blinked, and the smallest among them, no more than 7 years old, raised a trembling finger and pointed at Shadow. "He barked," the child whispered, lips cracked and voice dry. "We prayed, and he barked." Aaron couldn't breathe for a moment. He looked at Shadow, who was now lying down at the edge of the hole, chin resting gently on his paws. He hadn't barked for attention. He'd barked because someone in the dark needed to be found, and he refused to stop until they were. The sun had shifted slightly in the sky, but Aaron barely noticed. Time didn't move the same when adrenaline took over. It stretched, then snapped, then folded in on itself. Minutes felt like hours. Seconds felt like decisions you couldn't take back. Backup had arrived. 2 marked units. 3 deputies. 1 EMT team on standby. But no one moved faster than Aaron. He was already back on his knees, sleeves rolled up, sweat clinging to the curve of his jaw despite the chill in the air. His shovel pierced the dirt with urgent strikes, every scoop tossed behind him like a man racing a countdown he couldn't see. Dust clouded the shaft of light beaming through the barn wall. Shadow spun in tight circles nearby, barking louder, now faster, like an alarm winding up, not down. He'd stop for a breath, sniff the dirt, then let out a guttural snarl that chilled every person on scene. Deputy Cortez crouched beside Aaron, breathing hard. "Lieutenant, what exactly are we looking for here?" Aaron didn't pause. "Children. 4 of them. Alive." Cortez paled. "Jesus." "Yeah," Aaron muttered. "Let's try to keep him with us." They kept digging. The earth was thick, sticky in places, layers of clay and compacted sand pressed down as if the ground itself had tried to forget what was underneath. Aaron could feel it in his wrists, in his ribs, a weight that wasn't just physical. Something didn't want to be found. Shadow's barking suddenly stopped. Aaron looked up. The dog was staring at a particular patch of dirt just 3 feet from where they were digging. Then, with no command, he began pawing again, slower this time. Controlled. Measured. Aaron followed him. Dropped the shovel. Pressed his gloved hand to the soil. He felt it. A shift. Not ground. Not roots. Something hard. He motioned quickly. "Cortez, Prybar, now!" 2 other deputies came over, tools in hand. They cleared the remaining dirt until something flat emerged. A sheet of plywood, hastily nailed into a frame set inside the ground. It was warped and splintered, patched with old hay and packed soil, not part of the original barn construction. This was something someone had built, recently, deliberately. Aaron knelt again, heart pounding. He didn't speak, just listened. Nothing. No voices, no movement, just Shadow's breath behind him and the pounding in his own ears. Then came the knock. So faint, Aaron thought he imagined it. Then again. One soft thump from beneath the panel. He jerked his head toward the medics. "Get the gurneys ready." Cortez stepped forward. "Sir, is that?" Aaron didn't answer. He didn't need to. He wedged the prybar beneath the board and yanked. The wood groaned like it didn't want to give up its secret. Then the panel lifted, and the world tilted. Inside, barely lit by the stray shafts of afternoon light bleeding through the seams of the boards above, was a cellar. Roughly 6 feet deep, maybe 10 across. The walls were dirt, the floor uneven. Someone had tried to insulate it, old carpets, blankets, rusted beams nailed across the top, like makeshift support. And in that hole, lying still, barely breathing, were 4 children. Aaron froze. It wasn't just the sight. It was the smell. Old sweat, mold, urine, starvation. It hit him like a punch to the chest. He staggered slightly and caught himself on the edge of the opening. One of the kids stirred a girl, maybe 7 or 8. Her wrists were bruised. Rope burned. She had straw tangled in her hair and a plastic bracelet wrapped around one ankle, the kind you'd see on hospital patients or lost pets. She looked up at the light with sunken eyes. Then she whispered, "Is it real this time?" Aaron's voice broke. "Yeah, it's real." She blinked once. Then, with what strength she had left, she pointed at Shadow. He wouldn't stop barking. Aaron swallowed hard. "I know. Cortez had already moved into action, signaling for medics, lowering a folding ladder into the hole. One by one, the children were carefully lifted out, silent, limp, light as empty coats. None of them cried. That's what stuck with Aaron most. No screaming, no wailing. Just the blank, haunted silence of children who had learned that sound only made you easier to find. Shadow stepped forward as the 4th child was lifted out, a boy, maybe 6, no shoes, knees skinned and healing poorly. The boy didn't speak. But when he was set down on the blanket the EMT had spread out, he crawled slowly, awkwardly, until his hand touched the side of Shadow's fur, and stayed there. Shadow didn't move. He lowered himself to the ground, let the boy lean against his side. A medic turned to Aaron. "You said 4?" Aaron nodded. "We've got them. They're all alive." He didn't respond right away. He was staring into the hole, at the blankets on the floor, the tin cup, the bucket in the corner, and the ropes. He clenched his jaw. "Get him out of here. Now!" Cortez stepped beside him. "Who the hell would do something like this?" Aaron didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he couldn't say it yet. He stood there while the medics carried the children to the ambulances, while Shadow stayed behind like a silent sentinel, guarding the hole until the last stretcher was loaded. And only then, when the barn was quiet again, and the patch of earth now uncovered like an open wound, did Aaron allow himself to breathe. Just once. The first sound wasn't a cry. It was a breath, shallow, labored, almost shy. Aaron hovered at the edge of the cellar, knees planted in the cold dirt, heart thudding behind his badge. Shadow stood just beside him, motionless now, ears perked forward like a statue carved from instinct. The plywood panel had been pushed fully aside. Daylight filtered down in weak, dusty shafts, illuminating just enough to make out shapes, 4 of them. Children, their outlines curled in against the walls, trying to disappear into the shadows they had already been swallowed by. Aaron's voice was low, steady, careful the way he'd speak to a deer trapped in a fence. "My name is Aaron. I'm a police officer. You're safe now, okay? You're safe." No answer. Then movement, a twitch of fingers from the smallest one. A boy no older than 6. His hands were bound at the wrists with duct tape, stained with dirt, and what looked like dried soup. His skin clung to his bones. Beside him, a girl slowly lifted her head. She was older, maybe 10. Her cheeks were hollow, her lips cracked, but her eyes were still watching. She didn't blink. She just stared straight into Aaron's like she didn't trust the light was real. Then, in a voice that sounded like leaves crunching under snow, she whispered, "We prayed. Someone would hear." The words gutted Aaron. He felt the heat rise behind his eyes. Not the kind that made you weep, but the kind that made you want to find the person responsible and ask them calmly what kind of monster chooses silence over screams. Aaron blinked once, nodded slowly. "Shadow heard you." The girl's gaze dropped to the dog. Her hand trembled, then stilled. Shadow lowered himself to the edge, paws over the lip of the hole. He didn't bark now. He didn't move. He just watched, tail still, eyes soft, a presence as steady as breath in the chaos. Aaron turned slightly and spoke into the comm clipped to his vest. 4 minors confirmed. Repeat, 4 children alive. Request medics at interior barn coordinates. Copy, came the answer. The air shifted. Outside, voices moved quickly. EMT boots thudded against old floorboards. Stretchers squeaked. But inside the barn, inside that small pocket of forgotten darkness, there was a hush, like the cellar itself was listening. Aaron spoke again, more gently now. "Can I come down?" No reply. He waited. Then slowly the girl gave a faint nod. One of the boys whimpered beside her, clutching her shirt with shaking fingers. Aaron signaled to Cortez. A folding ladder was lowered in. Every clang of metal echoed like thunder in that tight space. He climbed down slowly, each rung an act of caution. When his boots finally touched the ground, his knees buckled slightly. Not from the drop, from the sight. 4 children, all under 12. Faces sunken, lips colorless, wrists and ankles rubbed raw from makeshift restraints. One wore a Halloween shirt with a faded pumpkin on it. Another had shoes 2 sizes too big, like they'd been taken from someone else or left behind. There were no beds, just rags, a tin can, a water bottle chewed around the rim, and something that didn't belong. A baby monitor, long dead. Aaron crouched low, palms open. "We're going to get you out of here now. You don't have to be afraid anymore." The girl looked at him. "They said no one was coming." Aaron swallowed. They were wrong. Above them, Shadow let out a quiet sound. Not quite a bark, not quite a whine, more like acknowledgement. The children stirred. One began to cry. No tears, just the sound. A raw, dry keening like an old door being opened for the first time in years. Medics dropped down, efficient and quiet. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. Blankets were passed. IVs prepped, arms extended. The oldest girl wouldn't let go of Aaron's jacket. Even when the medics lifted her onto a stretcher, she clutched a fistful of his sleeve like it anchored her to something she could trust. Shadow trotted behind them as they emerged from the cellar eyes, sweeping every movement, like he still wasn't convinced the nightmare was over. And in truth, neither was Aaron. He stood beside the last medic as they loaded the smallest child into the back of the ambulance. The boy's eyes were half closed, lips pale. His fingers twitched once, then curled around the edge of the gurney. Aaron reached out, brushed dirt from the boy's forehead. "You're going home, kid," he whispered. The sirens hadn't started yet. The barn was still quiet, but something in the air had changed. Not relief. Not yet. Just the first note of a storm that had finally broken open, not with thunder, but with a bark. The sky over Willow Creek had turned the color of old tin, flat, gray, and indifferent. Aaron's patrol cruiser trailed behind the ambulance like a quiet sentinel, tires humming against the cracked asphalt. In the back seat, Shadow sat upright, gaze locked on the flashing lights ahead. He hadn't moved much since they left the ranch. No barking, no panting, just watching. The window was cracked slightly. Wind carried the faint scent of dust and horses, of disturbed earth and old wood, the last breath of a forgotten barn. Aaron gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The road stretched long and straight, cutting through miles of fields left fallow. No traffic, no birds, just the rhythmic pulse of the ambulance siren, a low, deliberate sound like a heartbeat trying to stay steady. He stared at the children through the glass pane ahead. 4 lives. 4 kids who might not have survived one more night. And they would have been missed eventually, but not fast enough. Not like this. Not without Shadow. Aaron glanced in the rearview mirror. Shadow's ears twitched, but his posture never changed. He wasn't just looking, he was still tracking something, still listening. "How did you know?" Aaron murmured, more to himself than the dog. There had been no footprints, no broken locks, no muffled cries or signs of recent human presence. The barn had looked abandoned in every way that counted. Yet Shadow, normally calm, obedient, silent, unless prompted, had barked like the world was burning. And he hadn't stopped until someone listened. Aaron's jaw tightened. His thoughts swirled. He'd worked with Shadow for 2 years. Trained together. Drilled for every scenario. But this was something else. Not training. Not protocol. Something primal. It was as if Shadow had felt pain that no one could hear. As if he'd been tuned to a frequency only broken things could broadcast. Aaron let out a slow breath and loosened his grip on the wheel. The siren cut off suddenly as the ambulance turned into the emergency entrance at Willow Creek General. Nurses and EMTs rushed out like a wave, taking the stretchers inside with crisp commands and unspoken urgency. Aaron pulled into a space near the edge of the lot, threw the cruiser in park, and looked back again. Shadow was still there. Eyes on the door. Body still tense. "Come on, buddy," Aaron said softly. He stepped out and opened the back door. Shadow didn't hesitate. He jumped down in one clean motion, paws hitting pavement without a sound. Together, they stood in the quiet, watching the hospital doors swing closed behind the children. A cold breeze pushed past them. Aaron lowered to one knee, resting a hand gently on Shadow's chest. "You saved their lives," he said, voice rough. Shadow looked at him, eyes dark and steady. And for a moment, just a moment, Aaron swore there was a flicker of something deeper in those eyes. Not pride, not triumph, just understanding. Like Shadow knew what had nearly been lost. Like he'd felt the edges of it pressing against that barn, against the earth, against time itself, and had said, "Not yet. Not today." Aaron stood again. He turned back toward the cruiser, but paused when he heard footsteps behind him. It was Officer Cortez, face pale, hands stuffed in his jacket. "They're stable," he said. "Dehydrated, undernourished, but they're going to pull through." Aaron let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "And the barn?" he asked. "Crime scene secured. No ID on who built that cellar. No fingerprints, no personal items. It's like someone scrubbed it clean." Aaron shook his head slowly. "No one scrubs that clean unless they've done it before," he muttered. Cortez looked at Shadow, then back at Aaron. "He knew before any of us. How?" Aaron didn't answer at first. Then he glanced down at the dog, who had finally sat, tail wrapped around his legs. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But I'm done doubting him. They stood in silence, a beat longer. Then Aaron turned back toward the cruiser. "I'll write the report. You stay with the scene. We're going to need to reopen some missing persons files." Cortez nodded and walked off. Aaron opened the passenger door this time. "Up," he said gently. Shadow jumped in and settled, nose pointed toward the hospital. Aaron walked around to the driver's side. As he slid into the seat, he reached for the radio mic and hesitated. He looked once more at Shadow, who now had his head resting on the window frame, eyes half closed, but still alert. "You felt something none of us could," Aaron whispered. "Maybe we should have been learning from you all along." The engine turned over. The cruiser pulled out slowly, and behind them, the hospital stood like a lighthouse, 4 young souls inside, alive because of a bark that refused to be ignored. The ride back was silent, but it was no longer empty. By sunrise the next morning, the town of Willow Creek no longer belonged to itself. Satellite vans, camera rigs, and reporters in tailored coats filled the streets like storm surge swallowing a quiet shore. They clustered outside the precinct in waves, shouting over one another, wires snaking like roots across the pavement. The sign on the department's front door, "Please ring for assistance," looked laughably out of place now, buried under flashbulbs and national media logos. A dozen microphones pointed in every direction, and all of them wanted one name: Shadow. "Can you tell us what alerted the dog to the children's location? How long has Officer Aaron Tate been working with Shadow? Is it true Shadow refused to leave the barn? Did he have prior trauma detection training? Are you aware he's already trending as America's hero hound?" Inside the precinct, Aaron stood by the coffee machine, watching it sputter slowly, like it, too, was overwhelmed. He hadn't touched his uniform since last night. Still smelled like earth and fear and horses. The laces of his boots were stiff with dried mud. Shadow sat by the desk composed, silent, unmoved by the chaos outside. Someone had printed off a screenshot from one of the national morning shows. German Shepherd saves 4 kids from abandoned farm cellar. A still image of Shadow, standing in front of the barn, ears forward, eyes locked on something unseen. Aaron ran a hand through his hair. He hated attention, always had. He became a cop to serve, to stay grounded, to keep things from unraveling, not to go viral. Yet here they were. Deputy Lena knocked softly on the doorframe. "You've got 5 more interviews scheduled, then a rep from CNN is requesting a live segment." He raised an eyebrow. "Liv?" "Liv." She hesitated. "You okay?" Aaron didn't answer immediately. He looked down at Shadow, who met his gaze without blinking, that quiet, unflinching stare that seemed to carry entire conversations without a single word. "No one's asking the right question," he finally said. Lena stepped further in. "What do you mean? They're all asking how he knew, what training he had, how this happened. But no one's asking why no one else heard them, why we didn't." Lena looked at him, eyes softening. "You're being too hard on yourself. We didn't have a tip, no evidence, no alerts." "But he did," Aaron said quietly. "He knew something was wrong in that place, before we even stepped foot in it." A long pause settled between them. Then Lena said gently, "That's exactly why people care. Because that kind of instinct, that kind of heart, you can't manufacture it. Shadow didn't save those kids because someone told him to. He felt it." Aaron glanced back toward the door. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. The world was watching, but it wasn't watching him. It was watching his partner. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. Suddenly, a low thump. Aaron turned. A package had arrived, hand-delivered. No postage. Just a note taped to the top, scrawled in frantic handwriting. "He saved her. Thank you." Inside, a drawing. Crayon. Shaky lines. 4 kids holding hands. A big dog in front of them, tail wagging. Eyes glowing gold. Aaron swallowed hard. He crouched beside Shadow and placed a hand gently on the scruff of his neck. "You've started something, you know that?" he whispered. "They're not just going to forget about you tomorrow." Shadow blinked once. No wag, no bark. Just stillness. But Aaron understood. Because when the cameras disappeared, when the last interview ended, and the world moved on, Shadow would still be there. Beside him. In the quiet. In the mud. In the calls. No one wanted to answer. Where it counted. Just then, the phone rang again. Lena picked it up. "Willow Creek Police. Yes, this is Deputy Suarez. Yes, we're aware. No, Officer Tate isn't giving public statements at this time. No, Shadow doesn't have an agent." She rolled her eyes as she hung up. "Someone from LA wants to turn him into a book series." Aaron smirked for the first time all morning. "He doesn't even like cameras." Outside, a chant started. "We want Shadow! We want Shadow!" Aaron stood, pulled the blinds, closed gently. Then he looked at his partner. "Let them cheer," he said softly. "You already did the work." The hospital room was too quiet for a child to be in. No cartoons playing in the background. No soft humming from a nurse. No rustling of a juice box or crinkle of a snack wrapper. Just sterile air, a heart monitor ticking steadily, and a silence so thick it almost had weight. Jamie sat cross-legged on the bed, unmoving. His hands clutched the thin hospital blanket, knuckles pale. His lips were chapped, eyes wide and darting, always toward the door. Always watching. He hadn't said a word since they pulled him from the cellar. Hadn't eaten, hadn't cried. The doctors whispered diagnoses in sterile terms. Selective mutism, shock state, Psychological freeze. But Aaron didn't need a clinical term to know what it meant. The boy was terrified. He watched from outside the glass panel, arms folded. Behind him, nurses discussed Jamie's vitals in low tones. One tried again to coax him into sipping from a straw. The boy flinched and looked away. Still nothing. Poor kid, one of them whispered. Third night without food. They might have to go 4. Aaron turned to Lena. Can we try something? She looked puzzled. What do you mean? He nodded toward the cruiser parked outside. I've got a partner who's not half bad at this kind of thing. 10 minutes later, Shadow padded silently into the room. No bark, no sound, just the soft click of nails against tile and the heaviness of his presence. Aaron had loosened the leash, but didn't need to guide him. Shadow moved like he already knew. Jamie noticed instantly. His eyes flicked to the doorway and widened, but not in fear. Something more like stillness. His body didn't recoil. His hands didn't grip tighter. He just watched. Shadow approached the edge of the bed and sat, not begging, not nudging, just sitting close enough for the boy to reach, far enough not to force it. Minutes passed. No one spoke. Then slowly Jamie's fingers loosened on the blanket. His feet slid toward the edge of the mattress. A nurse covered her mouth with both hands. And, without a word, Jamie reached out tentative, trembling, and let his fingers brush against Shadow's fur. The moment felt like breath returning after too long underwater. Aaron exhaled softly. Shadow remained still, eyes soft, tail gently thudding against the floor once. Then something even more remarkable happened. Jamie picked up the plastic spoon from the tray. He dipped it into the untouched applesauce. His hand shook, and most of it spilled before reaching his mouth. But he tried. Only when he swallowed did he look up at Aaron. Just for a second, and then returned to Shadow, his small hand now resting firmly on the dog's shoulder. Later, the hospital psychiatrist pulled Aaron aside. Whatever that dog did, don't stop. This boy has barely blinked for days. You saw how he was. Aaron didn't say anything, just nodded. The next day, Aaron brought Shadow again. And the next. By the 4th visit, Jamie had rearranged the pillows so Shadow could lie with his head near his lap. He'd even whispered just once, so soft it felt like the rustling of leaves in a dream. He found us. Aaron heard it from the hallway. The nurse gasped. He spoke, but Aaron didn't go in. He knew better. That moment wasn't his to interrupt. It belonged to a boy whose world had gone silent, and the dog who taught him sound could return in other ways. Shadow didn't wag like most dogs. He didn't lick Jamie's face or beg for attention. He simply stayed. That, in itself, was a language. Jamie began responding to touch, to light, to presence. And always, always his eyes followed Shadow out the door, like he feared the world might go dark again without him. And perhaps, in some small way, it would. Shadow didn't bark anymore. Not at door slams, not at passing cars, not even when a delivery truck rolled up outside the precinct and dropped a box with a thunderous bang on the asphalt. Aaron noticed it first during a late-night patrol. The cruiser rolled through back roads dusted with moonlight. Normally, Shadow would sit upright in the passenger seat, ears perked, gaze scanning fields and fence posts. But tonight, his posture was different, rigid, head low, ears tilted not forward and alert, but slightly sideways, like listening for something Aaron couldn't hear. Something wrong, buddy? Aaron asked quietly. Shadow didn't glance over. He just stared through the windshield, unmoving. The silence inside the cruiser pressed heavier than the radio static. Back home, it got worse. Shadow wouldn't settle into his bed near the fireplace like usual. Instead, he wandered from window to window, as if expecting something or someone on the other side. Every sound made his head twitch, but he didn't vocalize. No growl, no whine, just a deep, suffocating stillness. Aaron sat on the couch, watching the silhouette of his partner by the window. The German Shepherd stood with his nose just inches from the glass, breath fogging a small patch, eyes lost in the dark. He looked like a statue. No, not a statue. A sentinel, guarding something no one else could see. Aaron leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're not sleeping, are you?" he murmured. Shadow didn't move. He hadn't eaten his full meal in 2 days. He still responded to commands, still followed protocol on patrol, Still sat when told, but it was mechanical, robotic. Aaron knew this dog better than he knew most people. And whatever had clicked inside Shadow since the rescue, it hadn't stopped. It had only gotten louder. Later that night, Aaron lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Outside the door, Shadow paced the soft tick of claws on hardwood, like a metronome counting down to something he didn't understand. Tick, tick, stop, pause, tick, tick, tick. Aaron sat up, opened the door. Shadow was standing there, not looking at him, looking past him, like the hallway itself was speaking. And in his eyes, not exhaustion, but a strange, haunting weight. It wasn't the tiredness of a dog who had worked too hard. It was the heaviness of something left unfinished. Aaron knelt, rested a hand on his fur. "You still hearing them, aren't you?" he asked softly. "Or something else?" Shadow blinked, slow, didn't respond, didn't need to. At the precinct the next morning, Captain Thorne gave him a look. "You're walking like you haven't slept in a week, and your partner looks worse." Aaron gave a tired smile. "I'm fine. He's just a little off." Thorne raised an eyebrow. "That's the first time I've heard anyone say Shadow was ever off." Aaron sighed. "He hasn't barked once in 3 days. He's not eating. At night, he patrols the windows like we missed something." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "You think he smells something we didn't?" "I don't know what I think," Aaron admitted. "But he's not just tired. He's carrying something." Later, in the break room, Aaron sat across from Lena, nursing a stale cup of coffee. "I keep going over it," he confessed. "The cellar. The kids. What if we missed a room? Another trap door?" Lena tilted her head. "The forensics team swept everything. They would have found something else." "But Shadow's still listening," Aaron said. His voice cracked slightly. "Like someone's still down there. Like it's not over." Lena glanced toward the window, where Shadow was lying head on his paws, eyes open, watching. "That dog hears ghosts," she whispered. "And sometimes I wonder if he carries them." That night, Aaron didn't sleep. Neither did Shadow. And somewhere, in the back of both of their minds, something still echoed in the silence. A name never spoken, a cry never heard, a door never opened. And Shadow, who always knew what others couldn't, wouldn't rest. Because he felt it. This wasn't finished. Not yet. Jamie sat at the edge of the sterile hospital bed, legs dangling but not swinging. His hands gripped the edge of the thin mattress. Fingers curled tight into the sheets like they were the only thing tethering him to this world. He hadn't spoken a word in days. Not to the social workers, not to the therapists, not to Aaron. Only to Shadow, and even then, it was barely more than a whisper of breath, a brush of recognition. Sometimes he would reach for the dog's ear and hold it like a lifeline, but he never spoke of what happened. And now, there was another silence. One that belonged not to the boy, but to the systems meant to save him. "We ran his prints through every missing child database state, national, even international," said Marlene, the senior caseworker, as she stood beside Aaron outside the hospital room. Her arms were folded, voice tight. "Nothing. Not a match. Not even a partial. M6F. Aaron's jaw clenched. "That's not possible," Marlene sighed. "It shouldn't be. But we also found no birth certificate, no school enrollment, no hospital records. It's like he doesn't legally exist." Aaron's eyes turned to the boy behind the glass. Jamie was curled on his side now, eyes open, staring at nothing. "He has to come from somewhere." Marlene nodded slowly. "He does. But wherever it was hidden, carefully, intentionally." In the next room, a therapist tried again. "Jamie, can you tell me your last name?" she asked gently, holding up a laminated card with a smiling cartoon dog on it. Jamie looked at it, then away. "What about where you lived before? Do you remember a street, a building, a color?" He blinked, slowly, his hands tightened. The therapist tried one more time. "Do you remember your parents?" At that, Jamie finally moved. He sat upright, stiff not in response to the question, but to the pressure it carried. Then just above a whisper, he said, "There was no light." The therapist froze. "What do you mean?" Jamie didn't answer. He turned to the door, waiting for Shadow. Aaron sat with Lena later that evening, Flipping through files on the precinct computer, the screen glowed with page after page of nothing. No reported abductions matching Jamie's age. No family reporting a boy with those features. "How do you hide a child this completely?" Aaron muttered. Lena leaned over. "You don't. Not unless you never wanted anyone to look in the first place." Aaron rubbed his temples. "It wasn't just neglect. This is something darker." Lena looked toward the observation window. "He didn't come from nowhere, Aaron. Someone put him there. Buried. Bound." Aaron's voice dropped. "And someone doesn't want him found." Back at the hospital, Shadow sat beside Jamie's bed like a sentinel again. But this time, the boy reached out first. His small hand brushed Shadow's neck. Then, his lips moved. Aaron was standing by the door and saw it. Jamie was mouthing a word. Not a name, not a plea, but a location. Ash. Aaron stepped closer. "Ash?" Jamie nodded faintly, still not meeting his eyes. "Is that a name?" Aaron asked. Jamie shook his head. It burned." The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was coded. It was haunted, and it was leading them somewhere they hadn't looked yet. Outside, Aaron exhaled hard. Shadow leaned against his leg like a shadow made real. "I don't know where this leads," Aaron said to the dog, eyes narrowed. Shadow's gaze lifted to meet his, unblinking, knowing. And in that quiet exchange between man and dog, a new question began to form, one that neither the law, nor the files, nor the therapist could answer. What happens to a child no one was ever supposed to find? The hum of the vending machine filled the silence in the hospital hallway. Aaron stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, eyes flicking between the neon out-of-order sign on the coffee machine and the door to Jamie's room down the corridor. Inside, Shadow was curled on the floor, chin resting across the boy's feet like an anchor made of fur and breath. Jamie hadn't said much since that cryptic whisper about Ash, but he had started sleeping. That, Aaron knew, was its own kind of miracle. He didn't expect company, but that's when Marlene showed up again, clipboard in hand, voice casual. "Have you thought about temporary placement yet?" Aaron turned toward her, brow furrowing. "Placement?" Marlene nodded. "Jamie's technically in state custody now. He can't stay at the hospital forever. We need to move him to a foster environment, something stable." He exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar pinch behind his ribs. "You said there were no records, no next of kin, no idea where he came from." "Exactly, which means he'll need time in the system until we can get him evaluated and matched." Aaron crossed his arms. "With a family of strangers?" Marlene's voice softened, but she didn't back down. "With someone trained to care for trauma. Someone patient." Aaron glanced back toward the window. Jamie's hand was resting on Shadow's fur now, the way people clutch blankets in the dark. Not gripping, just connected. Then Aaron shook his head, stepping back. "I'm a cop, Marlene. I work 14-hour days. I see blood. I carry a weapon for a living. That's not the kind of home this kid needs." She waited a beat before answering. "Maybe not, but Shadow's already his home." The words hit harder than he expected. Aaron chuckled bitterly. "You do realize how that sounds?" Marlene smiled faintly. "I do. And I also realize that dog hasn't left that boy's side for more than 10 minutes since the rescue. We tried placing Jamie with a trauma therapist over the weekend. He refused to get out of the car. Cried so hard he vomited. They had to bring him back just so he could sit next to the dog." Aaron leaned against the wall, jaw tight. Marlene tilted her head. "Look, I'm not saying adopt him. I'm saying we need a soft place to land while we figure things out. A familiar face, a familiar bark," Aaron muttered. "This wasn't supposed to happen." "No," she agreed. "It wasn't." That night, Aaron lay back on the creaky couch in his living room. Boots still on. Shadow rested nearby, ears twitching in sleep. The house was quiet in that rural kind of way, just the occasional groan of wood or wind sneaking beneath the doorframe. He stared at the ceiling, trying to measure the weight of the question pressing down on him. He didn't ask for this. But Jamie hadn't asked to be buried in the dark either. He didn't have answers, or the right words. He wasn't even sure he had the patience. But then he remembered the way Jamie had held Shadow's ear like a lifeline, and the way Shadow had led him. Not as a handler, not as a cop, just as someone safe. The next morning, Aaron walked into the hospital with 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for Marlene. She arched an eyebrow when she saw him. "I'll do it," he said, handing her the cup. "Temporary. Until you figure something else out." She didn't say thank you. She didn't smile. She just nodded, like this was the most natural choice in the world. Aaron turned toward Jamie's room. He didn't know if it was right, but it was real. And sometimes, real was all a kid had left. The wind made a sound through the trees that night, like something being whispered, but too far away to hear. Aaron unlocked the door and pushed it open, stepping aside so the boy could enter first. Jamie paused on the threshold. He clutched the canvas duffel Marlene had packed for him, mostly hospital-issue clothes and a spare toothbrush, and looked around the house like it might vanish if he blinked. "Your room's down the hall," Aaron said gently. "It's not much, but it's got a window that looks out east. Sometimes you can see deer in the morning." Jamie said nothing. Shadow padded in behind him, tail sweeping once across the hardwood before the dog nudged Jamie's elbow with his snout. Not a command, just an invitation. That was enough. The boy followed. The guest room was small but clean. Faded posters from Aaron's teenage years still clung to one wall. Old baseball players, a torn map of Wyoming, and a photo of a mountain range Aaron had never gotten around to visiting. The bed was freshly made. A small nightlight plugged into the socket cast a warm, flickering glow onto the floor. Jamie didn't unpack. He just set the duffel at the foot of the bed and sat down stiffly, hands in his lap like he didn't want to take up too much space. Like he wasn't sure he was allowed to exhale. Shadow curled up near the head of the bed without waiting for a cue. His breathing was slow, steady, the sound of sleep without fear. Aaron stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure what to say. He wanted to fill the silence with instructions, reassurances. Something but Jamie's eyes were on the window now, not him. "I'll leave the door open," Aaron said quietly. "If you need anything, just knock. Or just come find me." Jamie didn't turn, but his shoulder rose and fell in what might have been a nod. Aaron flicked off the overhead light, leaving only the nightlight behind. Outside, the wind moved again, brushing against the house like a memory. Jamie lay on his side, facing the window. The glass reflected stars, not many, but enough. They shimmered like quiet witnesses in the cold sky. He watched them without blinking, his breath shallow. Shadow stirred, then got up, moved to the edge of the mattress. The dog placed his chin on the bed, eyes level with the boy's, not demanding, just there. The boy reached out slowly, fingers finding the thick fur above Shadow's brow. No words passed between them. None were needed. Because here, for the first time in what felt like forever, the dark didn't press quite so heavy. Here, it breathed, and Shadow kept the monsters at bay not by growling, not by guarding, but by simply refusing to leave. Down the hall, Aaron stood at the kitchen sink, staring out into the unlit yard. The stars were clearer out here in the country, and he suddenly remembered how much time he used to spend as a kid just lying in the grass, counting constellations until sleep found him. He wondered when he'd stop doing that. He wondered how long Jamie had stared at ceilings without ever expecting morning. Aaron shut off the faucet, ran a towel over his hands. Then he walked down the hall, past the guest room just far enough to hear the faint rhythm of breathing. One light, 2 shapes. Stillness. He didn't know what tomorrow would ask of them, but tonight, just this one night, the house was quiet. And for the first time, in a long time, it felt like home. The morning sun broke through the clouds with a hesitant warmth, the kind that didn't quite reach the bones but made the frost on the windshield shimmer like thin lace. Aaron tightened his jacket as he opened the cruiser's back door. Jamie stood on the porch, clutching his sleeves, his oversized hoodie swallowing his frame. He didn't speak. Hadn't since the night before, but when Shadow leapt into the back seat and turned to look at him, Jamie followed like gravity had shifted, and the pull was silent but absolute. No orders, no coaxing. Just that quiet bond, unspoken and undeniable. Aaron started the engine. The drive to the precinct passed in a hush, broken only by the occasional static of the radio and the soft click of Shadow's nails shifting on the leather seat. Jamie pressed his forehead to the window, watching the world slip by, cattle fencing, power lines, a rusted-out truck half buried in prairie grass. He didn't look at Aaron, didn't ask questions, just stared like he was memorizing everything, or maybe searching for something familiar. Aaron glanced in the rearview mirror once. Then again. Still no words. But Shadow's eyes flicked toward the boy every few seconds, like a metronome set to a beat only they could hear. At the station, the air buzzed differently now. The case had changed everything. Detectives nodded more when Aaron passed, as if he'd solved something extraordinary, but the truth was, he hadn't solved it at all. Shadow had. Or fate. Or something else none of them could name. Jamie stood beside Aaron's desk, hands in his hoodie pocket, face unreadable. When Deputy Morales bent to offer him a muffin, he just blinked at it like it was a trick. "He eat yet?" she whispered to Aaron. "Not unless Shadow's nearby." Morales nodded slowly. "That dog's something else." Aaron didn't reply. He just turned back to his computer, fingers hovering above the keyboard. His thoughts weren't on reports or headlines. They were on the boy's silence, and the heavy question behind it. Shadow sat at Jamie's feet. The boy didn't reach down to pet him, not the way most kids would, but his sneaker pressed lightly against the dog's side, just enough contact to count. Hours passed like that. No tantrums, no words, but also no fear. When Aaron had to step away for a meeting, Jamie didn't move. He just stayed where Shadow was, still, watchful. Like he was tethered not by obligation, but by something older. Older than memory. Older than names. After lunch, Aaron came back to find Jamie sitting on the floor beside the canine kennel. Not inside, it just near. Shadow had pushed a toy between his paws and lay down in that slow, deliberate way German shepherds do when they're off duty, but alert. Jamie mimicked his posture, knees tucked, back straight, eyes steady. They were staring at each other, breathing in rhythm. When Shadow let out a low, almost imperceptible whine, Jamie tilted his head. Then he did something no one expected. He reached out 2 fingers and touched Shadow's ear. The dog didn't flinch, and for a moment neither did the boy. Aaron stood frozen, watching from the hallway, unsure whether to interrupt or let the moment breathe. He chose silence, because silence, for Jamie, wasn't emptiness. It was progress, muted, but real. Later that day, on the drive back home, Aaron tried again. "You want to pick what's for dinner tonight? We've got mac and cheese, or I can try that weird frozen pizza I should have thrown out 2 months ago." Jamie said nothing, but Shadow let out a short bark from the back seat, ears flicking at the word pizza. Jamie smiled. Barely. But enough to matter. Enough to remind Aaron that some kids speak in laughter, others in tantrums. But this one spoke in silence and slow healing. And dogs. Always dogs. That night, when Aaron turned off the light in the guest room, he didn't say goodnight out loud. Didn't want to make it awkward. But Jamie, already under the blanket, glanced at him once. Then, without prompting, tapped the mattress. Just once. Shadow jumped up and laid down beside the boy. Aaron closed the door with a quiet breath of gratitude in his chest. Not for what was said, but for what had shifted, however slightly. The popcorn crackled in the pan, filling the kitchen with the scent of butter and faintly scorched kernels. Aaron shook the pot with one hand and steadied a ceramic bowl with the other, trying not to burn dinner for the 3rd night in a row. He glanced over his shoulder. Jamie sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, staring up at the television, where a muted Pixar menu flickered, waiting to be selected. Shadow lay beside him, chin on his front paws, tail lazily thumping against the hardwood. Aaron could have sworn the dog was watching the screen like he actually cared which movie was next. "You guys good with the one about the balloon house?" he asked. No response from Jamie. But Shadow's tail thumped again just once. Aaron smiled. "Up it is." The lights dimmed. Aaron set the bowl between them on the couch. He didn't ask if Jamie wanted some. He just placed it there, within reach, like it belonged to both of them by default. The opening credits rolled. For a while, no one moved. The silence wasn't heavy, not like the first few days. It was gentler now, like 2 people learning to sit in the same rhythm, even if the beat didn't need words. Shadow had claimed his usual spot, curled in a half-moon at Jamie's feet, letting the boy's sock toes press into his fur like a second blanket. Jamie watched the screen without blinking, eyes wide, pupils dancing with the colors. Aaron snuck glances at him in the low light. The boy still hadn't spoken since the day he arrived, but something had shifted since that morning at the station, since the moment with the toy in the kennel. He leaned forward, took a handful of popcorn, and leaned back without making a sound. Another win. Halfway through the movie, Aaron chuckled not at the film, but at how Shadow had rolled over on his back and begun softly snoring. Jamie noticed too. The corners of his mouth twitched. Aaron saw it. Didn't say anything. Just let it happen. They reached the scene where the house lifts off the ground, bright colors and soaring strings, and without thinking, Aaron reached for more popcorn. His hand brushed Jamie's. The boy froze. For a split second, Aaron felt it, that electric pause. That tension that used to come before a flinch, before the boy would pull away or shrink back into himself like a turtle into its shell. But this time, Jamie didn't move. Didn't jerk his hand. Didn't flinch. Aaron left his hand where it was for a beat longer than necessary, just enough to let the silence settle. Then he pulled back, casually, as if it never happened. But it had. And they both knew it. The movie continued. Jamie reached for popcorn again. This time, his fingers were steady. Aaron leaned back into the couch, letting his shoulders sink a little. The way you only do when something in the room finally feels safe. Funny how a house floating with balloons feels more believable than what we've been through lately, he muttered to no one in particular. Jamie didn't react, but Shadow snorted in his sleep and kicked one-leg dream chasing something Aaron could only guess. Later, as the credits rolled and soft piano music played, Aaron clicked off the television. The room dimmed to just the glow of the hallway light, casting warm shadows against the walls. Jamie sat still, legs drawn to his chest now, like he didn't quite want to move. Aaron stood. "Time for bed, kiddo." Jamie blinked once, looked at him, then stood too. But before he left the room, he paused, turned, and without looking up, reached back and lightly touched Shadow's head. A slow, almost reverent motion, like saying goodnight, like saying thank you. Shadow opened one eye, let out a low sigh, and drifted back into sleep. Aaron watched the boy disappear into the hallway, then sat back down on the couch. Alone now, bowl in his lap. He hadn't expected this version of fatherhood. He hadn't expected any version at all. But there it was. Quiet, tentative, real. And in that quiet, there was something sacred. Something healing. The old K-9 training field hadn't seen life in years. Rust streaked the chain-link fence, and patches of weeds burst through the cracked pavement. Obstacles still stood wooden A-frames, tunnels, half-rotted tires, silent reminders of dogs that had once leapt and lunged with fire in their eyes. Aaron used to bring Shadow here when things were simple before the case, before Jamie, before the weight that now seemed stitched into every breath. Now Aaron stood at the gate again. But he wasn't alone. Jamie clutched the fence rail, peering through the gaps like someone looking into a memory that didn't belong to them. Shadow trotted ahead, tail level, ears up, not alert, like on duty, but aware. This was his old turf. "You used to bring him here?" Jamie asked quietly. His voice was barely a whisper, but it was a voice, a real one. Aaron didn't let the shock show. He nodded. "Yeah," he replied softly. This is where he learned how to trust. Jamie watched the field for a long moment, then pushed the gate open with both hands. It creaked, reluctant. He stepped inside without waiting. Aaron followed. Shadow moved like a memory in motion circling the field, sniffing markers only he remembered. He stopped at a dusty old ball wedged between a hurdle and the fence. It must have been there for months, maybe years, but somehow Shadow nosed it free and dropped it near Jamie's feet. Jamie looked up at Aaron. Aaron just smiled. "Go on, he's asking you." The boy picked up the ball like it was sacred. He weighed it in his hand, then wound up an awkward throw, angled and short, more hope than coordination. The ball thumped once in the grass and rolled a few feet. Shadow was on it in a heartbeat. No hesitation, no commands, just instinct. He grabbed the ball in his jaws and loped back, tail wagging. Ears perked a soldier-turned child again. Jamie laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. A thin, breathy sound that trembled out of him like a note escaping a cracked violin. Aaron froze. Shadow dropped the ball. Jamie threw again, and again. Each throw better, each laugh a little louder. The sound filled the field like light after a long storm. Aaron turned his face just enough to hide the moisture pooling in his eyes. He watched the boy chase something invisible, not the ball, not the dog, but something deeper, maybe a piece of himself he thought he lost in the dark. Shadow didn't just fetch. He returned it with his eyes on Jamie, waiting, trusting, again, until they both collapsed in the tall grass, breathless, smiling, boy and dog tangled together like vines reclaiming a forgotten ruin. Later, as clouds gathered on the horizon and the wind picked up with that dry, electric taste of coming rain, Aaron called them in. But Jamie didn't move right away. He lay beside Shadow, hand resting lightly on the dog's chest, feeling it rise and fall like a steady drumbeat. "I didn't think I could laugh anymore," he said, barely audible. Aaron didn't reply. He couldn't. His throat was too tight. He just nodded. Sometimes silence said more than words ever could. As they walked back to the car, Jamie holding Shadow's leash with one hand and the old ball in the other, Aaron looked at the field one last time. The rust still clung to the gates. The weeds still cracked through the concrete. But something had changed. Maybe it was the echo of a laugh that didn't used to live there. Maybe it was hope, faint, thin, but beautiful. The scream tore through the night like glass against stone. Aaron jolted upright in bed, heart punching his ribs, breath ragged before his mind caught up. For half a second, he thought it was a siren or a coyote howl caught in the wind. Then he heard it again. A child's voice, high and raw. It was the barn, the barn. Please don't lock the door. He was out of bed before his feet could feel the floor. Jamie was curled in the corner of the guest room, knees drawn to his chest, eyes wide but unseeing, like he wasn't in the room at all, just trapped somewhere his body had left behind. The blankets were tangled in the middle of the bed, kicked off in panic. Moonlight streamed in through the window, pooling pale blue on the carpet. Jamie trembled like his bones were trying to leave his body. Aaron knelt down slow, palms open. "Jamie," he said softly. "It's okay. You're not there anymore." Ugh. But the boy was far away. "It was the barn," Jamie whispered again. "They locked it. There were no lights. Just eyes. Eyes in the dark." Then he started sobbing. Silent at first, then wrecking, as if his ribs had given out. Shadow appeared without a sound, pacing straight into the room like he'd heard Jamie's name from the stars. His ears were back, tail low, sensing panic like scent. He crossed the space in 3 strides, curled beside the boy, and nudged his snout under Jamie's shaking arm. Jamie flinched. Then he saw him, and something broke, but not the kind that shatters, the kind that unlocks. Jamie collapsed into Shadow's fur like it was the only solid thing in the world. His small fingers gripped the dog's neck, clung like he was falling, like letting go meant going back to that place again, the barn, the dark, the silence that screamed louder than any voice. Shadow didn't move, just breathed slow, chest rising and falling like a lullaby for someone who'd forgotten what safety felt like. Aaron sat beside them, his back against the wall, hands limp between his knees. He wanted to do something, say something, but the moment didn't belong to him. It belonged to them, the boy and the dog, the survivor and the sentinel. Minutes passed, then more. Eventually the sobs dulled into tremors. The tremors softened into breath. The breath leveled into silence again, not the terrifying kind, but the fragile kind that comes after a storm. Aaron finally spoke, his voice no louder than the wind. "You remembered something, didn't you?" Jamie nodded against the dog's neck. "They put us in a barn. The smell was old wood and fear. They made us stay quiet. For hours. Days? I don't know. One night, I thought I heard someone else crying, but it was me." Aaron stared ahead, throat thick. He didn't ask who they were. He didn't push. He just listened. "I dreamed I was back there," Jamie said, his voice cracking. "Except this time, no one came." Shadow shifted, gently pressing more of his weight into the boy's side, like he could anchor him to now. Jamie gripped tighter. Aaron swallowed hard. His chest felt too small for his heart. "You're safe here," he whispered. "You hear me, kid? Nobody's ever putting you back in the dark. Not while I'm around. And definitely not while he's around." Jamie didn't respond with words, but he reached one hand out, eyes still glazed, and touched Aaron's wrist barely a brush, but enough. Then, For the first time, Jamie leaned into both of them, not just the dog. They stayed like that until the sky outside began to fade from ink to indigo. A quiet surrender to dawn. Eventually, Aaron carried the boy back to bed, Shadow following closely behind. Jamie didn't protest. His arms hung limp around Aaron's neck like a child, too tired to fight the pull of sleep. Aaron tucked him in slowly, smoothing the sheets. Shadow jumped up without needing a command, circling twice before settling at Jamie's feet. The boy stirred once, then pressed his palm against the dog's fur. Only then did he fall back asleep. Aaron watched them for a long time, a boy who remembered the dark too well, and a dog who refused to leave him in it. It began with a broken pencil. Jamie sat cross-legged at the end of Aaron's worn leather couch, a soft blanket bundled around his legs, staring intently at the stubby yellow pencil he'd retrieved from the drawer by the phone. No one knew why he'd asked for it. Eve hadn't spoken since the nightmare, but when Aaron handed it over, Jamie held it like it meant something. A piece of the world he could control. An hour passed before anyone noticed what he was doing. Aaron was in the kitchen, heating up leftover mac and cheese, when he saw Jamie bent over a spiral-bound notebook, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth, eyes narrowed with quiet purpose. Shadow lay on the rug beside him, chin resting on paws, breathing slow and even. The dog's eyes weren't closed, though. He was watching like always. Like he knew this was important in a way Aaron didn't yet understand. Aaron stayed silent, just watching from the archway. Jamie's hand moved in slow strokes. Hesitant, like every line was a leap. He didn't erase, he didn't hum, he didn't look up. Only after a while did Aaron hear the faint scratch-scratch of pencil on paper, a sound more powerful than any scream Jamie had ever made. Later that night, after Jamie had gone to bed, Aaron found the notebook left open on the coffee table. At first, it looked like any child's drawing lines too straight, proportions all off, faces round and without mouths. But there was something haunting in the simplicity. 3 stick figures stood side by side. The one on the left was tall and blocky, square shoulders, a small badge scribbled in black. The figure in the middle was smaller, hands dangling awkwardly at its sides. A sideways cap sat atop its round head, but it was the figure on the right that made Aaron stop breathing for a second. It was a dog, large ears, a tail caught mid-sway, but most notably, around its neck, a cape blue and flapping like it was caught in the wind. Shadow, drawn as a hero. Taped below the drawing, in uneven handwriting some letters backwards, some too large, was a single line written in pencil. "Thank you for finding me." Aaron didn't realize he'd sat down until the couch creaked beneath him. He read the words again, then again. Something about the letter made his throat close. Not just the thank you, but the me. Like Jamie had only now decided he was worth finding. Like part of him had believed, deep down, that no one ever would. The boy who hadn't spoken. The boy who screamed in the night. The boy who drew heroes instead of trusting people. And yet here he was, leaving a note. Leaving proof. Shadow padded over, his nails clicking softly against the floor. He stopped beside the couch and looked up, eyes calm but alert, like he was waiting for permission to breathe. Aaron ran his hand along the dog's head, slow and wordless. "You knew," he murmured. "From the beginning, you knew he needed us." Shadow didn't blink, didn't vag, just stayed there, silent and solid. Aaron looked back at the page. 3 figures, side by side. He found himself whispering, more to the air than to the dog. "He sees you with a cape." He felt Shadow's weight lean slightly into his knee. A quiet answer, and maybe a bit of pride. Later that night, Aaron folded the page gently and tucked it into the back of his wallet. Not out of sentiment, but something more sacred. Something like an oath. He didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know what pieces were still buried inside Jamie's memories or what might come when they surfaced again. But tonight, there was proof that in a world that had tried to forget him, one boy had picked up a pencil and remembered who had brought him home. It was a Tuesday. The kind of day that passed like fog-soft, colorless, almost too quiet. Aaron had the morning off. Paperwork could wait. So could the broken printer at the station and the voicemail blinking red for 2 days straight. He let it all sit in the background while the smell of scrambled eggs filled the kitchen and the sun filtered through the blinds like slow gold. Jamie sat at the table, legs swinging off the chair, chewing in silence. Shadow was at his usual post, curled beneath the table, tail tapping once every so often, almost like clockwork. Aaron didn't say much. He'd learned not to rush silence. Sometimes it held more truth than questions ever could. But today was different. Today, Jamie kept stealing glances. Small, quick ones. Like a thought was blooming and he wasn't sure if it had the right to be spoken. Aaron leaned on the counter, sipping lukewarm coffee. "You okay, kiddo?" Jamie nodded, then shrugged. His fingers fidgeted with the edge of the napkin. Then, slowly, he spoke. Voice low, cautious. Can I call you something?" Aaron lowered his cup. "Something like what?" Jamie hesitated, then looked at Shadow, like the dog gave him courage. Like this wasn't just a question, it was a test of belonging. "Coach." The word landed like a stone in still water. Coach. Not Dad. Not Mister. Not Sir. Coach. It was quiet, but it carried weight. It wasn't a title. It was a choice. Aaron didn't smile right away. He just blinked. "Coach, huh?" Jamie nodded quickly, as if he might take it back if Aaron didn't respond soon enough. Aaron crouched beside the table, meeting the boy's eyes. "That what I look like to you?" Jamie's voice came softer now. "It's what they used to call the man who stayed." That silenced everything. The clock, the fridge, the sound of wind outside. Just stillness and truth. Jamie looked down, suddenly embarrassed. "I can pick something else if it's dumb," Aaron cut in gently. "Hey, number. It's not dumb." He glanced at Shadow, who tilted his head slightly, as if he understood the sacredness of what had just happened. Aaron reached out, not too fast, and ruffled Jamie's hair once, a motion as light as wind. "Coach works just fine." For the first time in days, Jamie grinned. Not big, not loud, but real. And that grin half-toothed, crooked, and new-made Aaron feel like the floor beneath them had shifted slightly. Like the ground they were standing on wasn't so uncertain anymore. Like trust had started to grow roots. Later that afternoon, Aaron found a sticky note Jamie had left near Shadow's leash. It had a sketch on it, childlike and uneven, drawn in green marker. It showed 3 figures again. A dog, a boy, and a man holding a whistle. Above the man's head was a single word, written with confident all-caps letters, Coach. Aaron didn't keep that one in his wallet. He stuck it to the fridge, right next to the magnet that read, "Family isn't always blood." The morning came wrapped in nerves and newness. Aaron stood by the front door, lunchbox in one hand, backpack in the other. The backpack was blue, plain, save for a small keychain dangling off the zipper plastic whistle. Jamie had picked it out himself, said it reminded him of Coach. Jamie emerged from his room slowly, dressed and buttoned, hair combed in lopsided lines. He didn't speak, didn't have to. His eyes did all the talking. They were wide, wary, but not scared. Shadow was already sitting by the door, vest on, alert but calm. Almost like he knew this wasn't a patrol or a rescue, it was something harder, something called normal. Aaron knelt and zipped the pack closed. "You ready?" Jamie nodded, then paused. "Only if he goes," the boy whispered, thumb brushing Shadow's fur. "He's already on the team," Aaron replied. "You're the one we're waiting on." The school was small white walls, chipped benches, a red slide in the corner of the yard. It looked more like a memory than a place, familiar to everyone but Jamie. The bell hadn't rung yet. Kids clustered in little groups, laughing and bouncing like they'd never known quiet. Parents lingered. Teachers herded gently. Jamie stepped out of the cruiser. Shadow followed, close, steady. The boy's hand brushed his back like a tether. A few kids pointed. A couple whispered, "Cool dog." But one girl, freckled nose, hair in twin braids, walked right up. She didn't ask permission. She just reached out, hand open and slow, and patted Shadow's head. "Hi," she said to Jamie, eyes soft, not prying. "He looks like a superhero." Jamie didn't reply, but his shoulder dropped. His fingers uncurled. And then barely, just a sliver, he smiled. Not for long. Not enough to draw attention, but enough for Aaron to see it from across the lot. The kind of smile that didn't have words behind it, yet just relief. Like someone had cracked a window in a room that had been shut for too long. Shadow didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply stood, the quiet bridge between then and now, like he'd been made for this. The teacher, Mrs. Langston, walked over, kneeling beside Jamie with a warmth that didn't feel rehearsed. "We have a desk for him by the window, and Shadow can lie next to it, as long as he doesn't snore." Jamie gave the smallest nod. Aaron stayed back. He didn't say goodbye, didn't hug. That wasn't their rhythm. Instead, he tapped 2 fingers against the brim of his cap. A silent, "I see you. You've got this." Jamie didn't wave, but he looked back once before following the teacher inside. One last glance. Just enough. Aaron sat in the cruiser for a full minute after the door closed. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It wasn't the kind of victory that made headlines. It was better. It was survival, repotted. Dismissal spilled onto the front steps of Pine Creek Elementary like bees, from an upturned jar backpacks bouncing, sneakers squeaking, voices tripping over each other in release. Aaron parked the cruiser beneath an oak whose leaves were just flirting with autumn gold and watched the tide of kids search for faces that meant home. Jamie emerged near the end, small but certain. A sheet of paper clutched tight to his chest and Shadow pacing perfectly in step beside him. The dog wore his vest, but his tail swayed with something lighter than duty almost, a hum of satisfaction that buzzed the length of his spine. Aaron stepped forward. "How'd the first day treat you?" Jamie didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed over the paper, eyes shy at the edges but shining. Aaron unfolded it carefully. Crayon strokes bold, determined filled the page. 3 figures stood beneath a sky, the color of new hope. One tall, broad-shouldered in blue, a smaller one with a ball cap tilted sideways, and a big-eared dog wearing a cape that fluttered off the page. Above their heads, in bright red block letters, Jamie had written a single word: home. Aaron's throat tightened. He took in the details show Jamie had drawn the badge on Aaron's chest, how Shadow's tongue lolled in a half-moon grin, how the stick-figure boy stood between them, arms stretched wide enough to link them together. It was the first picture Aaron had ever seen, in which he appeared as part of a family, and the artist was a boy who, only weeks ago, had no name anyone could find. Jamie shifted, suddenly uncertain. "Is it okay?" Aaron knelt so they were eye level. "It's better than okay, kiddo." His voice cracked just enough to be real. "I'm honored you drew me." Jamie's shoulders loosened, the way a door eases from its rusty hinges when pushed often enough by gentle hands. Shadow leaned his head into Jamie's side, and the boy's fingers found the fur behind the dog's ear grounding, anchoring. "Coach?" Jamie asked, barely above a whisper. "Yeah? Can we put it on the fridge, next to the other one?" Aaron swallowed the knot in his chest. "Absolutely." Yamya nodded, satisfied. He climbed into the back seat, Shadow hopping up beside him with a practiced grace. Through the mirror, Aaron watched as Jamie held the drawing up to the window, letting the late-day sun glow through the crayon colors like stained glass. Shadow's nose bumped the paper once, as if to sign it. On the drive home, country music buzzed low from the dash nothing fancy, just chords and stories about roads and redemption. Jamie didn't speak, but he hummed along a soft, off-key vibration that made Aaron's fingers tap the steering wheel in time. Every so often, Jamie's gaze flicked to the front seat, to the reflection of Aaron's eyes in the mirror. And each time Aaron answered with the faintest smile, a silent, "I see you" in return. At the house, Jamie bounded up the steps with quiet eagerness. The refrigerator door clicked open, magnets clattered, and a new masterpiece took its place beside the crudely sketched hero hound from the week before. 2 pictures now. One a thank you, one a declaration. Both maps charting the journey from lost to found. Aaron watched the boy step back to examine his gallery, arms crossed like a tiny curator judging balance and placement. For a moment, Jamie's silhouette overlapped with shadows on the linoleum floorboy, and dog fused in a single shadow long enough for Aaron's heart to stamp the image into memory. "Looks perfect," Aaron said. Jamie's reply wasn't verbal. Instead, he handed Aaron the magnet shaped like a sheriff's starth, one Aaron always used for grocery lists, but had never noticed Jamie admiring. "For your lists," the boy whispered, pressing it into Aaron's palm. "So you don't forget stuff." "Ugh." Aaron let out a soft laugh that felt warmer than any heater could manage. "I'll keep it at the very top." Jamie nodded, content, and wandered toward the living room where Shadow had already flopped onto his side. sighing like work was finished for the day. Jamie lay beside him, head on the dog's ribcage, letting the rise and fall rock him the way boats rock children into dreams. Later, as dusk turned the windows to mirrors and cicadas carried on outside, Aaron sat at the kitchen table staring at the drawing again. The badge, the cape, the word home. He realized Jamie hadn't drawn walls or a roof, just people and a sky. Maybe, to a kid who'd lived in darkness, walls didn't mean safety. People did. He pinned the page to memory, then to the fridge, and finally poured 2 bowls of cereal for dinner because routine could wait and joy sometimes came sugared. Shadow's toenails clicked over. Jamie followed, barefoot, pillow-creased cheek pressed against the fabric of his oversized t-shirt. Aaron slid the second bowl toward him. "Cereal for dinner's a secret tradition," he said. "Only for teammates." Jamie spooned the first bite, considered it, nodded. Shadow drooled theatrically until a piece of cereal accidentally fell. Jamie giggled a quick, unguarded sound that echoed inside Aaron's ribs like a starter pistol. Family pictures on the fridge. Laughter around a table. A dog in a cape. Some victories were loud, trumpeted on front pages and nightly news. Others were drawn in crayon and pinned beneath refrigerator magnets, quiet proofs that the world, while broken, still mended in the hands of children and the hearts of dogs who refused to stop listening. Aaron reached across the table and tapped the whistle keychain dangling from Jamie's backpack. "Team meeting tomorrow morning?" he asked. Jamie grinned, cereal milk on his chin. "Yes, coach?" Outside, the sky settled into a deep indigo. Inside, 3 lives settled into something braver than routine, something like belonging. The gravel road to Willow Meadow Therapy Farm wound between amber fields and stands of cottonwood, their late summer leaves rattling like soft applause in the breeze. Aaron rolled down the window and let the air carry in the smell of sun-warmed hay and something sweet molasses from the feed bins, maybe. In the back seat, Jamie leaned forward just enough to see past Shadow's ears. He didn't speak, but his eyes tracked every fence post, every cloud of swallows rising in sudden, swirling flocks. Shadow's head rested on Jamie's thigh, tongue lolling, as if he already knew this place meant rest instead of rescue. Marcy Collins, the farm's director, and an old friend of the K-9 unit met them at the gate. Straw hat, denim overalls, the kind of smile that unfolded slowly, like a sunrise without hurry. "Good to see you, Lieutenant," she said, then crouched to greet Shadow. "And the hero himself." Shadow accepted the ear rubs with dignified restraint. Marcy's gaze shifted to Jamie. She didn't force a handshake or even a hello. She simply offered, "We've got someone special who could use a gentle groom if you're up for it." Jamie tucked his hands into his hoodie pocket, eyes flicking toward the line of paddocks. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. They followed Marcy across the yard, past goats lazing on wooden spools, and a trio of pot-bellied pigs rumored to snore louder than freight trains. Every animal turned an ear toward Shadow assessing, then relaxing when they sensed no threat. At the last stall stood a dapple-gray mare with a silvered muzzle and eyes the color of warm tea. Her name Lily was stitched in pale thread on the faded purple halter hanging by the door. "She's 26, Marcy said, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "Rescued from a neglect case last winter. Slow as molasses, gentle as rain, likes kids who whisper." Jamie stepped closer, one cautious sneaker at a time. Lily bent her head over the gate, blowing a soft huff that ruffled Jamie's hair. He froze but didn't flinch. Marcy placed a soft brush in his hand. "Just long strokes, neck to flank. She'll tell you if she wants you to stop." Jamie's fingers tightened around the cedar handle. Aaron noticed the boy's knuckles were not white. No tremor ran through his wrist. Shadow sat beside him like a steadfast shadow no, pun intended ears, half-mast, watching the exchange as though grading an invisible test. Jamie lifted the brush. The first stroke was tentative, barely skimming Lily's coat. The mare sighed, stamped once, then lowered her head farther in equine permission slip. Jamie tried again, firmer this time. Dust rose in lazy puffs. Sunlight streamed through the slats, catching in the haze like glitter. Aaron felt something inside him unclench. He'd seen Jamie's hand shake while fastening a button or tying a shoelace, but here, guided by the rhythmic rise and fall of the horse's breathing, they were steady, purposeful, almost graceful. Marcy leaned into Aaron. Sometimes the big ones make the quiet hurt feel smaller. M. Aaron nodded, unable to look away from the boy who, only weeks ago, wouldn't step into a grocery store without pressing against Shadow's flank. Jamie moved to Lily's other side, repeating the slow, deliberate strokes. Every so often he paused to watch the dust settle, like noting proof that he was doing something, leaving a mark that wasn't bruised or broken. When he reached Lily's shoulder, the mare swung her head around and nuzzled Jamie's elbow. The boy let out a surprised breath. A tiny, "Oh, that might have been the first note of laughter." Marcy beamed. "She does that when she likes someone." Jamie glanced at Aaron, uncertain. Aaron broke into a grin. "Sounds like you're in the club." The boy's lips curved a shy, sideways smile bright enough to paint sunlight on stone. They stayed nearly an hour. Jamie brushed Lily until her coat shone like polished pewter. He helped Marcy measure out carrot sewn for Lily, one for Shadow, one tucked into Jamie's pocket for later. Shadow accepted his piece delicately, then settled at the barn door as if to guard the moment from intruders. When it was time to leave, Jamie removed Lily's halter with fingers that didn't fumble once. He stood on tiptoe to press his cheek briefly against the mare's warm neck. No words passed between them. None were needed. Back at the car, Jamie opened the rear door for Shadow first, then climbed in beside him. He closed the door with a softness Aaron hadn't taught him respect for the hush that follows healing. As Aaron pulled onto the gravel road, he checked the mirror. Jamie was stroking Shadow's fur with one hand, the other still holding that spare carrot. He was humming so quietly, Aaron almost missed it, the same off-key tune he'd hummed during movie night, now carrying on the dusty afternoon light. For the first 3 miles, nobody spoke. The world outside rolled by in shades of wheat and sky. Then Jamie's voice drifted up, fragile but sure. "Coach?" "Yeah, buddy. Can we go back next week?" Aaron smiled at the road ahead, heart full enough to spill. "We can go back whenever you're ready." Jamie settled into the seat, shoulder touching Shadow's. The dog let out a contented sigh, as if to say, "Mission accomplished for today." Sometimes progress was a shouted victory. Other times, it was the quiet hush of a barn, the steady heartbeat of a horse, and a boy who finally found a place where his hands didn't tremble. And that, Aaron thought, was all the miracle they needed this side of tomorrow. The scent of funnel cake and kettle corn drifted through the late summer air, weaving itself around the tilt A, Whirl's metallic shriek, and the lazy croon of a country cover band on the makeshift stage. Willow Creek's annual harvest fair wasn't big 3 rows of game booths, a handful of rides hauled in on flatbeds, and enough neon to make the grain silos glow, but to Jamie it looked like a whole new planet. Aaron paid the entry fee and handed the wristbands to the volunteer at the gate. He kept an unobtrusive eye on Jamie, who stood just inside the chain link, pupils wide, one hand fisted in the fabric of Shadow's vest. The German Shepherd moved with practiced calm, nose twitching at the medley of sense cotton candy, livestock, sunscreen, possibility. "Anything catch your eye?" Aaron asked. Jamie didn't answer, but his gaze snagged on a booth, half hidden behind a line of kids. A wooden backdrop painted with cartoon ducks, glass milk bottles stacked in shaky pyramids, and a rainbow ring toss stand crowned with a faded sign, "Win a giant teddy." Aaron followed his line of sight. "Ring toss, huh? Classic." Jamie's grip tightened on Shadow's harness. Then surprised he nodded. "All right," Aaron said, motioning them forward. "Let's see what you've got." The booth attendant was a high schooler in a straw hat and sunburnt grin. "3 rings for $1, bud. Land one over a bottle. Pick your prize." Jamie dug in his pocket and produced 2 quarters and a crumpled dollar bill money. Aaron had slipped him earlier. For snacks. He laid the dollar on the counter. The kid set 3 plastic rings down. "Step right up, champ." Jamie slipped the first ring over his wrist. Aaron noticed the boy's shoulders rise then settle. No trembling. No flinch when a ride whooshed behind them. Across the midway, Shadow sat in a tidy heel, eyes tracking Jamie as if each ring were an oath. Jamie drew his arm back. Released. The ring sailed in a perfect arc then, clinked off a bottle, landing in the straw. Close, but no victory. Jamie retrieved the second. Deep breath. Another toss. This one veered left, bounced twice, rolled under the counter. A giggle bubbled from somewhere behind them. A pair of twin boys high-fived. Aaron tensed. Would Jamie shrink? But the boy only brushed a lock of hair from his forehead and lined up the last ring. Third, throw wide. It missed by half a foot, spinning into the pile of misses like a tiny plastic comet. Silence stretched. The attendant gave an apologetic tilt of his head. Sorry, little man. Aaron opened his mouth ready to praise effort, ready to soften the loss when Jamie did something Aaron hadn't predicted at all. He laughed. A small, breathy, burst the sound, rusty from lack of use, but unmistakably real. Dimples appeared under dusty cheeks, eyes crinkling in unfiltered delight at his own near misses. It was the kind of laugh that didn't care who heard, or why. Aaron's chest tightened. He would have paid a year's salary to bottle that sound. Another round? The attendant asked, genuinely cheering now. Jamie looked up at Aaron, expectancy glowing like midway lights. Aaron slid $2 onto the counter. Keeping coming. They played 5 rounds. Jamie never landed a single ring, though one skimmed a bottleneck so closely the attendant gave a theatrical gasp. Each miss earned another laugh louder, freer. A tiny cluster of onlookers cheered him on. Someone yelled, "Come on, champ, you got this!" Every encouragement seemed to unlock another notch of joy. On the final toss, the crimson ring traced an elegant parabola, touched the rim, then dropped inside the bottle's mouth with a soft clink. The crowd erupted. Jamie's eyes went ocean-wide. The attendant whooped, sweeping an absurdly large teddy bear from the prize rack bigger than Jamie by half and set it in the boy's arms. Applause died down as people drifted away. But Jamie stayed rooted. He buried his face in the bear's plush fur, shoulders quivering not from fear this time, but from something sparkling and new. Shadow pressed his nose to the bear's paw, tail giving a cautious wag. Jamie knelt, still hugging the prize, and wrapped one arm around Shadow's neck in silent thanks. Aaron crouched beside them. "How's it feel to be a champion?" Jamie's smile was shy but steady. He didn't answer. Words weren't necessary. Instead, he tugged at the bear's floppy arm until it draped comically over Shadow's shoulders like a shared mantle of honor. The dog tolerated it with stoic grace. Aaron ruffled Jamie's hair. "Ice cream break for the winners?" This time, Jamie did speak own word, soft but certain. Yes. They found a picnic table beneath strings of warm bulbs. Sticky vanilla dripped onto napkins. Shadow made short work of a dog-safe scoop handed over by the vendor for the hero. Jamie leaned against Aaron's side, teddy bear wedged between them like extra insulation from the night air. Laughter from the tilt-a-whirl. Smells of funnel cake and sawdust. And somewhere in the distance, the pop of a BB gun at the shooting gallery. Jamie watched the glow-in-the-dark Ferris wheel turn. Every so often, he glanced at Aaron, then at Shadow, then back at the lights like stitching the moment into memory. Aaron realized his own cheeks had been smiling for minutes without noticing. A breeze tugged at the edges of the midway, carrying the promise of approaching autumn. But for now, fair lights painted everything gold. And a boy who once lived in unbroken dark had missed every ring, but still won the night. Sometimes, healing wasn't measured in therapy hours or case file checkmarks. Sometimes, it was a missed throw, a giant teddy bear, and a laugh that made the whole midway brighter. The teddy bear from the fair sat propped in a rocker at the foot of Jamie's bed, its stitched grin catching the moonlight slanting through half-drawn curtains. Shadow lay across the doorway like a living threshold, ears twitching at every creak the old farmhouse made settling into midnight. For a few blessed hours, the house held only the hush of crickets and the soft tick of Aaron's bedside clock. Then Jamie screamed. It wasn't the raw terror of that first week, but a strangled gasp as if fear had learned to whisper instead of roar. Aaron was out of bed in 3 strides, heart thudding. Shadow was already in motion, colliding with the doorframe as he scrambled for the boy's room. Jamie sat bolt upright, eyes wide and slick with dream sweat. His fists clenched the quilt, breaths short and sharp. The teddy bear had tipped over in the panic, one plush arm reaching toward the floor like a fallen spectator. Shadow leapt onto the mattress without ceremony, wedging his body between Jamie and the dark. Jamie's fingers burrowed into the dog's ruff, anchoring there. Aaron knelt beside them, voice low. "Same dream?" Jamie nodded, swallowing. "2 was back in the barn. Couldn't find the door." His whisper cracked. "But this time, there were more kids. They were crying." Aaron's chest tightened. Nightmares were stubborn. They rarely arrived empty. Handed. They carried echoes, unfinished stories begging resolution. Shadow whined a soft, vibrating note then settled, his steady breathing a metronome against Jamie's racing pulse. Minutes passed before Jamie spoke again, voice muffled against fur. "Coach?" "Yeah, buddy." A shaky inhale. "Can we go help animals tomorrow?" Aaron blinked. "Help animals?" Jamie nodded into Shadow's neck. "Like Lily. And the pigs. Maybe more. I don't like feeling scared, but when we help them, it feels quiet." The room went still, except for the distant hum of the refrigerator cycling on downstairs. Aaron's mind rewound the day at Willow Meadow, the way Jamie's hands had steadied on the brush, the grin under dusty cheeks. He realized what Jamie was truly asking. "Give me a way to turn the nightmare outward into something good." Aaron placed a hand on the boy's back. "Yeah, we can do that." Jamie eased back, studying Aaron's face as if testing the promise for cracks. Finding none, he exhaled a breath that seemed to empty more than lungs. His shoulders dropped. The trembling faded. Aaron righted the teddy bear and tucked it beside the pillow. Shadow stretched, nose bumping Jamie's chin in wordless reassurance. The boy managed a small, tired smile. "Try to sleep," Aaron said, smoothing Jamie's hair. "Tomorrow we'll see Marcy about extra chores." Jamie lay down, still touching Shadow. His eyelids fluttered, heavy but hopeful. "Thank you," he whispered, though whether to man or dog, Aaron couldn't tell, and it didn't matter. Aaron lingered in the doorway after the boy drifted off. Shadow's amber eyes met his in the shadows, a silent pact passing between them. Guard the boy's dreams, guard the daylight that would follow. Aaron returned to bed, but sleep stayed distant. Instead, ideas, unfurled paint, and repair work at the barn. Reading to therapy goats, maybe a weekend project, building new stalls. He pictured Jamie laughing again, not despite the nightmares, but because he'd learned to seed light in the dark's cracked soil. Some rescues, Aaron realized, were round-trip journeys. You went back braver each time until the nightmare lost interest and wandered away. In the hallway, moonlight pooled like silver water. Tomorrow would ask its questions. Tonight had given an answer. Healing grows fastest when it's shared, and somewhere beyond the window, just past the edge of sound, a barn full of animals waited for a boy, a dog, and a man called Coach to bring another quiet morning. The courthouse in Oak Ridge County wasn't grand just. 3 stories of beige brick, flanked by 2 tired sycamores that shed bark like sun-peeled paint. Still, the steps felt monumental as Aaron guided Jamie up them, Shadow padding at their side with his service vest freshly brushed. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed, while a ceiling vent rattled in half-hearted protest against the August heat. The clerk behind the glass partition smiled when she saw Aaron approach. His stack of papers was already in order: background checks, home study, letters from the precinct vouching for character and capacity. A gold paperclip held them together like a bookmark in the life he never expected to read. Jamie hovered close, thumb tracing the seam of his pocket where a small plastic medal rested. Aaron had noticed him studying it all morning, a trinket from the fair, molded to look like solid gold, but feather-light, embossed with a single 5-pointed star. The clerk slid a final form beneath the glass. Last signature, Lieutenant. Aaron took the pen. His hand hesitated for a fraction of a second, as if acknowledging the gravity of ink becoming promise. Then he signed A.A.R.O.N.J. Blakine. Steady strokes. Jamie's eyes tracked each letter. When Aaron set the pen down, the clerk stamped the document with a loud thunk that echoed off linoleum floors. "Congratulations," she said softly through the circular speaker. "The petition for permanent guardianship is filed. Judge Whitaker will finalize within 30 days. But barring any objections," she looked at Jamie and winked, "you're officially his coach on paper now." Jamie's shoulders relaxed, almost as if the stamp itself had released a knot inside him. Aaron ruffled the boy's hair. "Ready to head home?" Jamie whispered something Aaron didn't quite catch. He knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "What was that?" "Outside," Jamie repeated, glancing toward Shadow. "Two have something." They found a patch of shade beneath one of the sycamores. Cicadas hummed overhead like summer static. Shadow sat, tails sweeping a lazy semicircle across dusty concrete. Jamie reached into his pocket and produced the plastic medal. A short red ribbon looped through a hole punched in its top. He crouched, carefully unclipping Shadow's collar taga standard K9 badge polished to a subdued shine. With quiet reverence, he slid the toy medal beside it, fingers fumbling only once. "You're the real star," Jamie murmured, fastening the clasp. Shadow's ears pricked forward. He gave a single wag, the kind that starts at the base of the tail and ripples up the spine, that nudged Jamie's cheek with his nose. The medal swung and flashed, catching sunlight, looking for all the world like precious metal. Aaron swallowed the lump forming in his throat. It wasn't the metal. Plastic couldn't hold that much weight. It was what the gesture crystallized, a boy who once made no sound, now crowning the dog who'd carried him out of silence. Jamie stepped back, surveying his work. On Shadow's collar, government-issued brass nestled against cheap carnival plastificial honor and childlike wonder side by side, neither outshining the other. "It's perfect," Aaron said, voice low. Jamie nodded. "Heroes need medals." Aaron considered that, then crouched to Shadow's level. "You hear that, partner? Promotion," Shadow answered with a gentle chuff, as if to say he never did the job for medals anyway. The courthouse door squeaked behind them. Marlene, the caseworker, emerged with a manila folder. She offered Aaron a thumbs up from the top step, then made her way over. "All set?" she asked. "All set," Aaron confirmed. She looked at Jamie. "How's it feel?" Jamie glanced at Aaron, then Shadow, then back at Marlene. "Feels safer," he said, the word tasting new but right. Marlene's eyes softened. "That's exactly what it's supposed to feel like." She handed Aaron the folder. "Copy of everything for your records. And a reminder family court will send you the final decree soon. But between us," she winked, "paper's just paper. This part," she gestured to the trio, "is already done." Aaron tucked the folder under his arm. "Thanks, Marlene, for everything." She waved them off. "Go celebrate." They did, in their own quiet way. A stop at Buddy's Diner for cheeseburgers Shadows with no bun, extra bacon. The waitress, Tracy, had a new jar of peanut butter treats behind the counter for the celebrity, as she called Shadow. Jamie devoured half a burger, then fed Shadow the last bite, metal twinkling under neon lights. Afterward, they drove home with windows down, evening air carrying the smell of cut hay. Jamie examined the Guardian copy of the court papers on his lap, fingers running over the raised seal like braille for the heart. "Coach." "Yeah, Buddy." Jamie hugged the papers close. "Does this mean I stay forever?" Aaron's hands tightened on the wheel. "As long as you'll have us." Shadow barked 1C, short, decisive sound, and Jamie laughed, a clear note against the rumble of the engine. "Forever then," the boy said. Back at the farmhouse, dusk painted the sky lavender. Aaron pinned the guardianship receipt to the refrigerator beneath the sticky note drawing and the whistle magnet. The fridge door now told a progression. "Thank you, home, and belonging," rendered in legal print. Jamie stood back and studied the display like a curator, ensuring the timeline felt right. Then he took the plastic Fair Metals Tweena, smaller one he'd won at the BB gun gallery, and pressed it into Aaron's palm. "For you," he whispered. "Coaches need medals, too." Aaron's vision blurred. He clipped it onto his key ring. The little star dangling against brass keys. "Best award I've ever gotten," he managed, voice thick. They turned toward the living room where Shadow already lay, metal gleaming, eyes half closed in dog contentment. Jamie settled against him, and Aaron sank into the couch, exhaustion and relief pooling in equal measure. Outside, cicadas gave way to crickets. Inside, 3 heartbeats synced beneath a roof that had shifted from shelter to sanctuary. Paper made it official. Love made it true. And on Shadow's collar, plastic shone like gold in the lamplight, reminding them all that some heroes wear capes made of laughter, and lions' hearts disguised as 4 gentle paws. By late October, Willow Creek had begun to exhale. Porch lights became quiet beacons, and conversations lingered longer on sidewalks that once hurried home. It began at a Tuesday council meeting when Mayor Henson, never known for sentiment, cleared his throat and announced a shift. 10% of the school budget would go toward mental health counselor sand, a pilot partnership with Willow Meadow Therapy Farm. The applause was hesitant, thin but real. Marcy Collins, straw hat in her lap, smiled wide enough to carry the room. Soon, flyers bloomed on bulletin boards. Kids and critters, after-school support. Children fed apple slices to therapy horses. The marquee at the elementary school swapped out equations for equine reading buddies. Jamie and Shadow became quiet ambassadors. They sat with children on hay bales, brushing ponies, sharing silences that didn't feel suspicious. Lily, the therapy mare, blew warm breath into small, trembling hands. Aaron, now Coach Aaron, on Tuesdays watched from the fence line. He didn't say much, but he saw it. Bruises fading from the inside out. A boy braiding a pony's mane who hadn't spoken in weeks. A girl reading aloud to goats who listened better than any classmate ever had. At the edge of town, an old feed store became the Bark Foundation, named after the bark that saved 4 lives. Old Man Dillard delivered alfalfa without explanation. Mrs. Singh brought honey for bake sales. The Robertson twins painted a mural, Shadow, Cape Billowing, with 4 shadowy figures climbing from darkness into dawn. Inside, rooms were named after rescue animals. The Lily Room, the Shadow Suite. Kids chuckled at Goat Getaway, but lined up anyway. Even the sheriff noted at breakfast, crime didn't drop because of patrol cars. Folks started looking out for each other. On Fridays, Farmers' Hour welcomed donations. Eggs, pickles, squash. Aaron manned the weigh station, while Jamie chalked prices. Shadow supervised with solemn grace. No one left, empty-handed. Then came the trip to Cedar Grove. Jamie, in the back seat of the minivan, held a manila envelope thick with drawings one taped shut, labeled, "For my friends." Shadow lay across his lap, head on his thigh. Aaron asked, "You ready?" Jamie nodded. At Cedar Grove's activity room, 3 kids sat in a ring of beanbags. When Jamie stepped inside, silence fell, but not the old kind. Sienna stood first, then Jaden and Malik. They wrapped Jamie in an awkward, breathy hug. Shadow pressed into their legs like mortar and old stone. Jamie hugged back tentative, then tighter. He passed out drawings. Lily to Sienna. 2 boys in a goat-drawn wagon for Jaden. A tent under stars for Malik. Camp out someday? Sienna unrolled a watercolor. Light pouring from a barn. Shadow huge above it all. Jamie whispered. He barked. We heard him. Heads nodded. The final drawing kept, hidden until then, showed 5 figures. Jamie, his friends, and in the center, a tall one labeled Coach. Above them, Found Family. They framed it and set it on the windowsill. The counselor leaned toward Aaron. They've said more in 30 minutes than all month. Aaron shrugged. That's the dog's doing. Shadow leaned into the counselor, metal flashing. Back in Willow Creek, November draped the town in cool hush. On the steps of the Bark Foundation, candles flickered in glass jars. A bronze statue of Shadow stood nearby, paw raised, gaze fixed toward something unseen. Below, for those who hear what others ignore. Jamie, pink-cheeked and solemn, stood with a folded index card. Aaron had helped trim its syllables to fall soft on the ear. Shadow lay at his feet, metal gleaming. Mayor Henson spoke first, grateful. Humbled Ann then stepped aside. Jamie took the mic. His voice, though small, reached every corner. Some heroes don't shout. They don't flash lights or sirens. They listen and bark. He paused, then added, stronger. And one bark can move. A mountain of silence. Applause swelled not, explosive, but warm. Sienna wiped her eyes. Even Sheriff Whitman dabbed his mustache. Jamie stepped down. Shadow licked his hand. He helped me write it, Jamie whispered. The crowd lined up to place candles at a new trellis in the garden. A carved plaque read, "Grow here. Courage. Kindness. Listening." As the flames flickered, teens hummed an old hymn. Goat Pancake stole a mitten. Lily stood still as a statue, flowers in her mane. Aaron closed his eyes, recording the scent of pine, wax, cinnamon, and something unnameable. Safety? Maybe? Later, Jamie knelt to adjust Shadow's medal. "You're still the star," he said. Shadow leaned into him, sighing through the boy's coat like wind in spring leaves. Aaron stood back, arms folded. Rescue, he now understood, wasn't the end. It was a beginning stitched together by anyone willing to carry light forward. Above it all, Shadow's bronze likeness kept vigil, paw raised. Around it, hundreds of small flames answered, "We heard you." And for the first time in a year, The darkness felt just a little less sure of itself. The first warm day of April settled over Pine Hollow like a benediction, coaxing wild violets from the ditches and setting a shimmer across the soy fields that unrolled to the horizon. At the edge of those fields where an abandoned horse barn once sagged into the dirt stood something entirely new. Wide cedar siding the color of fresh honey, tall windows breathing in morning light, and a gently sloped roof crowned with a weather vane shaped like a German shepherd's silhouette. A year of demolition, fundraisers, volunteer weekends, and stubborn dreaming had turned a place of hiding into a place of welcome. Today was the ribbon cutting, though the doors had already been quietly swinging for weeks, ushering in school groups, grief counseling circles, and anyone who needed the kind of listening that starts with pause and breath instead of questions. Aaron parked the cruiser beside a row of pickup trucks dusted with pollen. Jamie hopped out first, straightening the collar of his navy button-down. 11 now, he carried himself with the lanky confidence of someone who knew his own story and no longer whispered it. Shadow followed, metal gleaming, tail swishing a rhythm Aaron still recognized from patrol days. Alert but at ease, ready for ceremony, yet unconcerned with pomp. The crowd, clustered under a canvas awning, strung with twinkle lights that would glow come evening. Farmers in pressed jeans, teachers clutching clipboards of pledges, deputies in dress blues, and reporters balancing cameras on tripods, all eyes fixed on the flag-draped sculpture still hidden at the plaza's center. Marcy Collins, straw hat traded for a sensible sun visor, bustled over with a clipboard of talking points. "You're up after the mayor, Lieutenant," she whispered. 2 minutes. Heart stuff. No cop jargon. She winked at Jamie. "And you, sir, have front row seats with our guest of honor." Jamie grinned, slipping his hand into Shadow's harness handle. The dog leaned into the pressure steady. Certain while, Jamie guided them to a bench flanked by planters of marigolds and lavender. Their shadows mingled on the new flagstone. Boy, dog, and a shape that, if you looked just right, resembled a cape fluttering behind them. Mayor Henson took the mic, clearing his throat into sudden hush. He spoke of transformation, rotten boards pulled down, memories pulled up, the community hammering nails in rhythm with healing hearts. He thanked donors, volunteers, the county grant committee that agreed sometimes spreadsheets must bow to miracles. Then he gestured to Aaron. Aaron approached the podium, notes folded but unread. He found Jamie in the front and, beside him, Sienna, Jaden, Malikiak taller by inches, each holding candles unlit for now. The twins gave a thumbs up. Sienna mouthed, "You've got this." Aaron's voice when it came was steady and low. A year ago, this ground held silence so deep it swallowed children's voices. Today it holds every laugh, every tear, every question that walks through those doors. We built these walls, but a dog taught us why. If you're here, you already know his story. But the foundation isn't named for one bark, it's named for what happens after. The listening, the lifting, the light that keeps a town from forgetting what it heard. He looked toward Shadow, who tilted his head, metal catching sun. This center is for anyone still waiting to be heard, kid, vet, farmer, or family. If you've got a whisper, we've got a dog, a horse, a counselor, or just a quiet room, and we'll listen. Applause rose not, thunderous, but warm, like good bread shared at a long table. Mayor Henson returned with oversized scissors. "Jamie Blake, would you help us cut the ribbon?" Jamie's eyes widened, but he stood. Shadow rose too, as if tethered by invisible thread. Together they stepped to the silk ribbon stretched across twin cedar posts. Jamie gripped the scissor handles. Shadow sat, statue, still beside him. One slice clean, confident the ribbon fluttered to the breeze, and the crowd cheered. Wind swept the scent of lavender across the plaza. Somewhere a dove cooed, soft punctuation to applause. "Ready for the reveal?" the mayor called. 2 volunteers tugged cords, and the canvas dropped from the sculpture. Gasps rippled outward. A life-size bronze shadow stood atop a low granite plinth, paw raised mid-step, head turned as if catching a sound only he could hear. His eyes, polished to subtle gleam, seemed almost alive beneath the sun. On the pedestal, engraved letters glinted. For those who hear what others ignore. Jamie reached out, fingertips brushing the cool metal ear. Shadow mirrored the gesture, bumping his nose to Jamie's hip as if to approve. Aaron exhaled, surprised tears blurring edges. The artist had included the tiny plastic medal, immortalized in bronze, swinging from the sculpted collar. People lined up with flowers. Children pressed crayon drawings against the base picture of dogs. Barns split with light, stick-figure families holding hands. Sienna placed a sunflower at the paw. Malik and Jaden set a paper chain of cut-out kids around the pedestal. Marcy guided guests toward the wide double doors, inviting them to tour therapy rooms. The lily suite hung with horse photos, the pancake nook smelling faintly of cedar shavings, the shadow den stocked with bean bags and weighted blankets. In the lobby, a donor wall listed every name under the heading Raise Your Voice. At the top, 4 tiles bore names not of adults, but of children. Jamie, Sienna, Jaden, Malik etched in bright enamel colors. As the crowd drifted, Aaron found Jamie sitting on the plaza edge, legs dangling above fresh mulch, shadow panting beside him. Jamie held a small rock painted gold, inscription in shaky marker. "Thank you for listening." "Thinking deep thoughts?" Aaron asked, easing down beside him. Jamie shrugged, but his smile said plenty. "Feels lighter here." Aaron nodded toward the statue. "He carries some of it for us." Jamie turned, studying the bronze face, the raised paw. "Coach?" "Yeah? Do you think there are other kids still waiting to be heard?" A pause. Aaron followed Jamie's gaze beyond the foundation, past rooftops and tree lines to places unseen. "I do," he answered. Jamie set the painted rock at the statue's base. "Then we keep listening." Shadow barked on sharp, certain, a sound that flew out across the warm April air and settled like a promise on the wind. Aaron draped an arm over Jamie's shoulders, feeling the boy lean in, solid and sure. Farm dogs barked in the distance, echoes of the statue's silent vigil. The barn was gone, its ghost replaced by windows catching sunrise, by halls where hoofbeats and giggles mingled, by a bronze shepherd whose raised paw pointed always toward the next whisper in need of a listener. A new beginning, built on the site of an ending. And under the bright spring sky, Pine Hollow listened with open doors, open hands, and hearts tuned forever to the quietest call. The judge's gavel never actually struck. Family courtroom. 2 was too small and too mindful of echoes for theatrics. Instead, Judge Whitaker simply lifted a stamped packet of papers, adjusted her reading glasses, and said, "As of this moment, the petition for adoption is granted. Jamie Blake, you have a permanent legal guardian who, from the look of these forms, will answer to Dad more often than Coach going forward." No applause. No violins. Just a warm ripple of relieved laughter from Marlene, the caseworker, a sniff from Marcy in the row behind, and a single tail thump from Shadow sprawled beneath the council table like an oversized courthouse seal. Aaron stood, suddenly uncertain what to do with his hands. He settled for a handshake with the judge that turned into a half-hug when she pressed the certified decree into his palm. "Raising him may be harder than chasing bad guys," she whispered, "but infinitely holier." Jamie rose too, twist of nerves and thrill behind his eyes. Aaron met him halfway, kneeling so they were level. "All official," he said, tapping the folder. Jamie's fingers hovered over the embossed seal, then drew back as if it were fragile glass. "Feels bigger than paper," he murmured. "Because it is," Aaron answered, voice rasping more than intended. "Ready to celebrate?" Jamie's smile carried the weight of whole constellations coming home. "Cheeseburgers?" Aaron chuckled. "Buddy's Diner or bust?" Buddy's sat at the bend of County Road 6, neon sign buzzing like always, smell of griddle grease and nostalgia permeating the parking lot. Inside, vinyl booths gleamed cherry red beneath fairy lights left up after Christmas, for ambience, according to Tracy the waitress. They slid into the corner booth, the one Shadow fit under if he loafed sideways. Tracy appeared with menus they didn't need. 2 usuals, Aaron said, and 1 bunless, extra bacon masterpiece for the hero. Shadow's ears perked at bacon. Tracy winked, scribbled, vanished. For a moment, the only sound was the jukebox playing Patsy Cline and the sizzle of burgers on the flat top. Jamie traced circles in a patch of condensation on his water glass, gathering words the way he gathered courage to be rationed carefully. Aaron let the hush breathe. He'd learned not to rush moments that grew on silence. Baskets arrived, steam curling upward. Jamie bit into his burger, ketchup dotting his chin. Aaron slid Shadow's plate to floor level. The dog devoured it with a grunt of approval, metal clinking. Halfway through their fries, Jamie wiped his mouth, pushed his basket aside. "Coach?" Aaron set his cup down. "Yeah, bud." Jamie's hands twined, untwined. He inhaled like he meant to speak a paragraph, but only 3 syllables emerged, soft yet sure. "Thanks, Dad." The air changed. Not a dramatic swell, just a widening, as though the diner's walls had moved back an inch to make room for 2 hearts recalibrating. Aaron's throat prickled. "Dad." The word hit harder than the gavel that never fell, heavier than any badge he'd pinned. He cleared his throat, blinked moisture into manageable focus. "Thank you, son," he said, testing son on his tongue. It fit like a key finally turned. Jamie's face lit, shy and bright. He reached under the table, fingers finding Shadow's fur, grounding himself in the same rhythm that once steadied terror. Shadow looked up, eyes soft. If dogs smiled, Aaron swore he did. Tracy glided by, dropped 2 chocolate shake shooters in the house, and pretended not to notice damp eyelashes. "To new beginnings," she declared, tapping the table before moving on. They clinked plastic cups. Sweet ice cream cold cut through the lump in Aaron's chest. Jamie exhaled a laugh. "Dad? Shadow still outranks us." "Right?" Aaron grinned. "He's top brass in this family. We just follow orders." Shadow sneezed agreement, obviously. Jamie polished off his shake, leaned back, gaze skimming the diner. Families swapping stories. Old men arguing baseball. Tracy refilling coffee like love was bottomless. He turned to Aaron, voice featherlight. "Feels like we finally made it home." We did," Aaron said, meaning the booth, the house, the town, the space inside Jamie's ribs now unclenched. "And home's portable. Goes wherever we do." Jamie slid out of the booth, sidled next to Aaron, and for the first, time-looped an arm around his waist without hesitation. "Then let's take it everywhere," he whispered. Aaron squeezed the boy's shoulder. "Deal." They walked toward the door, Shadow leading, metal glinting, cape invisible but present. Outside, amber dusk soaked the sky, and the cruiser waited like an old friend. Aaron opened the back door. Jamie climbed in, Shadow following. As Aaron pulled onto the road, Patsy Cline spilled faintly from the diner's open window. The rearview mirror framed a boy leaning against a dog, eyes heavy but easy, hand resting on fur that once anchored him to life. A sign flashed by, "Thank you for visiting Willow Creek. Drive carefully." Aaron nodded at the words, whispered to the windshield, "We will." The highway unfurled ahead, dark ribbon lined with fireflies. No ceremony remained, just meaning, steady as heartbeat, bright as the plastic metal catching dashboard light. And in the hush between engine hum and country radio, the new family headed home wherever the road chose to place it next. Fireflies stitched slow galaxies across the backyard, their green pulses drifting like embers from a campfire that hadn't burned in years. Aaron rocked gently on the porch swing, boots propped on the rail, the low creak matching the rhythm of crickets and distant frogs. Summer's first warm night clung to the screens with the faint scent of honeysuckle. Jamie lay on an old quilt spread over the grass, hands tucked under his head, gaze lost somewhere between Orion's belt and tomorrow's possibilities. Beside him, Shadow sprawled belly up, paws twitching, nose twitching more, whiskers quivering at memories only dreams can cue. The home's windows glowed dim, behind Aaron kitchen light off, refrigerator hum faint. All chores done, all calls returned. The whole world licensed to rest for one glorious evening. Shadow's back paw kicked suddenly, thumping the ground like a soft drum. Then another twitch, and a muffled woof slipped through slack jaws. Jamie's laughter bubbled up light and effortless, the kind that comes from knowing monsters stay under beds only if you invite them. "He's chasing dreams again," he called toward the porch. Aaron smiled, letting the swing still. "Looks like a double-header fetch tournament." Jamie rolled onto his side, propping himself on an elbow. Moonlight silvered his hair, now too long for a buzz cut, almost ready for a preseason shag required of 7th graders who idolized soccer stars. "Think we should wake him?" "Nah," Aaron said. "Every dog deserves a victory Lepeven in his sleep." Shadow let out another bark, sharper this time, followed by a series of rapid ear twitches. His tail thumped the quilt, as if keeping score. Jamie giggled louder, clutching his sides, and the sound ricocheted off, siding, and into Aaron's chest like a small firework that didn't sting. Aaron stepped off the porch and crossed the lawn. He lowered onto the quilt, joints complaining in that middle-aged way that reminded him he'd once sprinted across parking lots in Kevlar, but now found joy in simply folding laundry with his kid. He lay back beside Jamie, shoulder to shoulder. 3 heartbeats counting down to nowhere in particular. The sky was one of those impossibly clear canvases, galaxies visible through the dome of night. Aaron pointed to a scattering of stars. See that? Looks like a tennis ball constellation if you connect the dots. Jamie squinted. I see a dog. With a cape. He traced lines in the air, connecting his own stars. Fair enough, Aaron conceded. Shadow's sky, Shadow's rules. They lay in comfortable silence. Shadow's dream barks punctuating night music. Then Jamie's voice slid in, softer. You happy, Dad? The question floated upward like a lantern. Aaron considered it, feeling grass cushion his shoulder blades, hearing low breath from a dog who once refused to obey despair. I think, Aaron said slowly, I didn't know what happy was supposed to feel like until it sounded like you laughing. Jamie's inhale caught, then steadied. Me too. A meteor streaked overhead, quick silver flashand. Aaron felt Jamie's shoulder press into his. They shared the moment without pointing, trusting the other had seen. Later, Shadow's legs stilled. His chest rose, fell, settled. He rolled onto his side, sighed like a man easing into a porch rocker, and opened one eye. Seeing his people beside him, he let it close. Again, mission parameters updated to safe. At ease. Aaron stared at the dog, memories looping. The barn's hollow thud. 4 pairs of sunken eyes. The ferocious bark that cracked silence wide enough for rescue to crawl through. It still felt miraculous-like, stumbling on water in a desert. But tonight, under quilt and stars, Miracle was simply a dog dreaming of tennis balls and a boy who no longer trembled at echoes. Some rescues go both ways. The thought drifted through Aaron's mind, unhurried and undeniable. He reached over, gently resting a hand on Shadow's flank, feeling the steady beat under fur. Jamie placed his smaller hand on top of Aaron's, layering warmth over warmth. Shadow's tail flicked, one last applause before sleep reclaimed him. Jamie yawned. Should we go in? Eventually, Aaron said, sliding an arm under the boy's shoulders. But I vote we stay until the next shooting star. Sometimes the sky writes back when you give it time. Jamie nodded against his chest, eyelids already slipping. Aaron tilted his head to watch constellations drift, and decided heaven wasn't just above. It was stretched out on a patchwork quilt, held together by laughter, trust, and a dog's impossible hearing. Minutesser, maybe hours later, Shadow stirred, trotted toward the house, and nudged the door as if reminding them bedtime existed. Aaron scooped Jamie, who mumbled drowsy protest but wrapped arms around his dad's neck anyway. Inside, Shadow circled twice before dropping onto his bed near Jamie's end. The metal clinked softly. Even plastic heroes need rest. Aaron tucked Jamie in, smoothing the quilt still warm with starlight. From the doorway, he watched the boy reach out and sleep, fingers brushing Shadow's fur. The dog didn't move, but his tail patted the floor once, twice as if counting heartbeats. Keeping time until morning brought fresh dreams to chase. Aaron turned off the light. Darkness settled, not the kind that swallowed, but the kind that wraps gently, like eyelids over sight. Down the hall, a clock ticked. Outside, crickets sang. Somewhere in the hush, a rescue completed itself again, and promised to do so every night. A bark for nightmares, a laugh for dawn, a hand for anyone still waiting to be found. Aaron smiled into the dark, listening, and, in the perfect quiet, he heard peace breathing right beside him. Sometimes, it's not the loudest love that saves us. It's the quiet kind. A nudge of a wet nose, a tail thump during our darkest night, or a dog like Shadow who didn't need words to remind us that loyalty can be stronger than fear. German Shepherds, especially, have this deep, unshakable sense of purpose. They carry our burdens like they were born to not just guarding our homes, but our hearts. And in return, all they ask for is a place to belong, a hand to rest beside, a little love given back. If this story moved something in you, maybe it's time to give that love a bit more shape. There's a resource I found, not selling you anything. Just something that helped me understand my dog a little better and deepen that connection. If you're curious, I'd be happy to share it, but no pressure. Just, if your dog's curled up nearby, maybe reach out. Scratch behind the ear. Let them know you see them, that they matter. And if you ever need a place to start or restart, you know where to find me. Take care, hug your dog. They already understand.